I'm just testing whether this is working. Hello to everyone and welcome to Uncovered Conference. My name is Flutura Kusari and I work for the European Center for Press and Media Freedom as legal advisor. I run a legal support program which provides financial support, money to pay lawyers' fees for journalists and activists facing legal actions, including whistleblowers. As you know, this session is dedicated to one of the biggest legal threats to journalists and activists, known as SLAPS, which is an acronym used for Strategic Litigation Against Public Participation. I have the pleasure to have the following panelists present online. Per Agerman, Stockholm-based freelance journalist, writer for Realtid. Welcome, Per. Viola von Kramon, member of European Parliament.
I think it's too late. It's too late. She was.
Sorry, I think I'm hearing someone else speaking. So I'll just continue presenting our panelists. Is Viola von Kramon, member of European Parliament and also member of the Media Working Group at the European Parliament, and Maria Orjonikidze, always difficult, and I apologize for pronouncing wrongly the surname, director at the Justice for Journalists Foundation. Now, in the next 40...
Listen.
Sorry, I'm hearing someone from the conference speaking. Barney or whoever is online, can you please just make sure that the microphone is muted? Thank you. So in the next 45 minutes, I'll moderate this session based on the following structure. Firstly, I'll share with you the work of ECPMF on anti-SLAPP measures. Then I'll invite Per to share his experience with a recent SLAPP lawsuit against him and Realtid. And then I'll invite Viola and Maria to share their experiences in fighting SLAPPs. First interventions will last maximum 7 minutes in order to allow time for questions. And I would ask you to use the chat for comments or questions. And let me start very briefly with the work we do on documenting SLAPPs, advocating for legislative changes, and providing practical support for journalists. As of last year, the ECPMF, with the support of JFJ, we've started to monitor, verify, analyze, and record legal actions against journalists and media outlets, including SLAPP lawsuits on our Mapping Media Freedom platform. This is a platform that registers lawsuits with a short description of facts, including the names of the parties, date of lawsuits, name of the court, etc. Once verified, these alerts are then published on our website and shared widely through our social media accounts. So far, we have over 30 alerts registered, including 22 active defamation cases against Daphne Caruana Galizia, 55 defamation lawsuits against Gazeta Joborska in Poland, 39 lawsuits against Necenzurirano in Slovenia, and several lawsuits in Albania, Serbia, Poland, Romania, etc. Now, we believe documentation is important because it helps us to understand this phenomenon. At the same time, we're highly involved in advocating for legislative changes that will deter and remedy SLAPP's lawsuits. A year ago, together with my friends Sarah Clark, Matthew Caruana Galicia, Tom Gibson, Julie, Charlie, Jessica, we were having sporadic discussions on what could be done to address the issue of SLAPPs. Now, for most of us, working on anti-SLAPP has become a full-time job. Currently, we're advocating before the European Union and the Council of Europe with the aim to have an EU directive against SLAPP lawsuits and a Council of Europe recommendation on anti-SLAPP. We believe it is necessary to have both an EU directive and a Council of Europe recommendation because we would make sure that we create guidelines for Council of Europe members, including Southeast Europe countries, as well as a legislative framework within the EU countries. And that is on measures that could be taken in order to fight SLAPPs at national level. Now, with regard to the potential EU directive, the ECPMF is a part of a large informal network which was brought together by Greenpeace International. The coalition has prepared and submitted to the European Commission a model directive. As ECPMF, we're proud to be the largest financial contributor in the drafting process of the Model Directive. And on our website, we can find all the relevant information on that. With regard to potential Council of Europe recommendation, we have published a call signed by more than 100 organizations and activists, which calls on the Council of Europe to adopt a self-standing recommendation to deter use of SLAPs. Now, all we need to do is to convince the Council of Europe to accept our call and to draft a recommendation. Let me conclude my part with a reference to our practical support offered by legal program of the ECPMF. We have a legal support program in place, financed by the European Commission and other donors, which provides financial support to journalists facing legal actions. The program enables journalists to apply for money to pay lawyers' fees. The applications are vetted. A final decision is taken in close consultation with our Legal Affairs Committee. Jonathan McCulley chairs the committee, and Sarah Clark and lawyer Ravi Naik are members of the committee. So far, we've supported over 70 journalists, and we will continue to do so in the future. And now let me turn to our speakers, and I would like to start with Per. Per, could you please share with us your investigation into EEW and the details of the lawsuits that you're facing? We're particularly interested to hear the personal and professional impact this lawsuit has had on you. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on this panel. My name is Per Agerman, and I'm a freelance reporter based in Stockholm in Sweden. I've been doing investigative business research for several different media outlets in Sweden for over 20 years now. And increasingly, today we see that many of our stories are not just about a company in one country. It's about several companies in very many jurisdictions, and we often see perhaps a company go public in Sweden that is not a Swedish company. It can have the domicile in another country, and so on and so forth. So the phenomenon that we are talking about today, in our case, it's really more and more common. We started to look into this company, Eco Energy World, EEW, and they are based all over the world. UK, have been in Cyprus, Australia. They have interest in Sweden, where they want to build them up in Sweden. They were also last year involved in trying to go public in Norway. So there's a lot of countries involved, and maybe I should start with explaining why we started to look into this company. Then I'm writing for a Swedish magazine, a news outlet called Realtid. It's real time in Swedish, and we are a trade magazine, small news outlet for readers in the financial and legal industry. So we write a lot about mergers and acquisitions, financing deals, and of course IPOs, companies going public on the stock exchange. That's the bread and butter of what we do, really. And in late last summer, then we were looking into a more and more popular phenomenon in the investment industry, this pre-IPO investments. You could get the opportunity to buy into a company before it's going public, and that's a more and more interesting proposition. You can see them all over the world right now, and we found this network of Swedish stock promoters selling those kind of shares. One of the shares were supposedly going to the London Stock Exchange, and you then as an individual Swedish investor could buy into this company before they were going public. And then we noticed that this network of Swedish stock promoters also were marketing the EEW share. And we noticed then that they had done this for about 2 years' time. And first it was shares in a company based in Cyprus. And then the company had moved to the UK. So during 2020, they were selling shares in this UK company. And why was this of interest to us? It was more than just the fact that they were selling shares in Sweden. It was also a Swedish entrepreneur behind this company, a guy called Svante Kumlin, Mr. Kumlin, and he's a Swedish born citizen, but he's living in Monaco since many years. So this is a really, it's a cross-border, multi-jurisdictional story to begin with. But of course, of interest to us was that shares were being sold in Sweden to Swedish investors, and we were basically doing a standard story. What is this company? What are they offering? Traditional due diligence about what you really were buying into as an investor. A standard story for us, nothing spectacular or anything. But the thing that was then maybe not so traditional or normal in this case was when we started to ask questions to the company, and we got a few emails to begin with, but really quick there were letters from a law firm in London, and they basically said that they didn't want to communicate about or answering any question from us. They weren't interested in that, and they said that we were facing potentially then.
Sorry, Per, these letters were before you published the story or afterwards?
We published a short. We mentioned the company in the story about the network, and we of course tried to contact them before that also, but then we weren't possible or able to get an answer from them. But then when we moved on to do more research and asking more questions, then the letters from the lawyers came rather quickly. I think there was over 15 of them in over a few weeks' time, so quite intense. And of course, we have no problem if they want to communicate through a law firm. That's okay, but we really didn't get any information or answers to our question. They just said that their basic statement was that they were not involved in selling shares in Sweden. So if we were going to propose that would be defamation and wrongful information. But when we looked into this network of stock promoters, they were, on the other hand, openly stating that they were in contact with the company and with Mr. Kumlin, and that they were somehow had their blessing to sell these shares. So it was two sides against each other. But when we saw shares being sold in the company and the Swedish promoters saying that they were doing this officially, so to say. So we despite being then under threat of legal action, we also got letters from a law firm in Monaco with the same message that if we didn't thread carefully here, we could then look forward to a lawsuit also in Monaco. But despite this, we felt that this was a public interest story. We felt that we had a good facts behind the story. Our research were solid, and we had tried to get comments and information from the company. So we felt that we had a good ground to publish. So we proceeded with publishing stories from late October and early November, then around 10 of them during a few weeks' time. And this led to us being sued then in the High Court in London in late November. And the interesting fact behind this is that they didn't just sue the reality media company or our editor-in-chief. They also had me and my colleague Anneli Östlund, also a freelancer, as a respondent in the claim. So, and this is one of the main impacts of going to London, of course, is they can't, in Sweden, you can't sue the individual reporter or journalist or source or any other person involved with publishing a story. You can only in Sweden sue the responsible editor, as we call it in Sweden. That's according to the Swedish constitution. We have this one-person responsibility system in Sweden. So they could bypass the Swedish constitution and legal framework by going to London, and then they can also sue me and my colleague Anneli then personally. So at the moment we are of course a team together with Reality defending our position, and Reality is of course depth going forward. So that's of course a very dramatic change from just asking basic questions, doing a basic story about a company, and then ending up in this not so fun position. And you can say at the moment we have challenged the claim on jurisdictional grounds. So we say that they can't show damages and other stuff in the UK. So London is not the right place to be. We had a 2-day hearing in court in March about this, and we are now waiting for the decision if this libel suit will move forward in London or if it will end here. So that's that's the status right now. But I can tell you this hasn't ended. Just yesterday, I received another threat asking questions to another company, and they say that they have to. Well, if we publish anything that they don't like, they will sue us. So I've been experiencing this kind of threats before in Sweden. We have also in Sweden you can get sued or questioned about publications, of course. But I've been experiencing this once in my career with the threat of a London suit before, but that didn't lead to anything. But our feeling is that this is more and more common. This is something. If you don't like the questions, if you don't like the media looking into your business and stuff, you rather fast today goes to a law firm and say that we have to take the legal action. And that is of course something that in a time when many media outlets face not so fun economic situation, this is of course raising the costs for investigative journalism a lot. If you have to defend every story like this, that would be impossible. So that's of course a real big problem for us in the whole media sector.
Thank you, Per. It's just depressing to hear a journalist saying that if we don't succeed in this lawsuit, we will face personal bankruptcy and also a lot of debts. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to summarize what you said because we have very short time and I'll need to move to Viola. But if there are no questions, then I'll get back to you and ask more questions because it's very interesting, I think, and important to share with the audience your experience. Viola, you're considered as one of the friends of media and media organizations. Personally, I'm very happy to always collaborate with you, not only on this field, but also on Kosovo, as you're the rapporteur for Kosovo, the European Parliament. Since you are a member of the media working group, can you share your experience, your work, and perhaps also future plans on anti-SLAPP measures that the group, the working group, and also you personally are working into? Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Flutura, and thanks to everyone who contributed to organize this very important panel, but of course also the conference as such. As you said, I mean, cases such as Per's and many others are absolutely depressing and more than concerning, really scary. While I think that, I mean, we have countries and states where media as such is under threat. I mean, they have, let's say, a very restricted field, a space where they can work. I mean, countries in the West Balkan, which we know very well, Eastern Partnership, and even Hungary, Slovenia now, and many other countries are under threat. But even in countries such as Sweden, where we thought that, first of all, there is a rule of law in place and we have actually free media, it is possible to more or less silence individual journalists, individual media outlets, individual voices. And that is really of a very, very high concern. I would say that with our Commissioner Jourova, we are, let's say, very, I wouldn't say safe, but we have somebody who has actually very much committed that she will take care of this. In her application speech in front of the European Parliament, she has given even a promise to the family of Garcia Daphne
Daphne Caruana
Caruana,
Galicia.
exactly. Sorry, Galicia. That she will make sure that those cases will be not, repeated in the long run, while we are still at the very beginning when I listen to Per and many others. So there's a lot of things to do, but nevertheless, I think with the support of the Commission and with the support from institutions such as yours and many, many other very active NGOs raising the awareness, making sure there is a transnational network of institutions working together with us in the European Parliament, with other colleagues in national parliaments, I think we can achieve, hopefully pretty soon, also a legal base for preventing those cases, or at least making sure that the likelihood, the probability of this kind of slaps would be less and decreasing. So there is, and there were already initiatives in the old Commission and Commissioner or President Juncker, but not so, let's say, ambitious and not so successful. For now, I can say that we have we have written a letter to Commissioner Jourova last May. She has replied to that and actually gave us full support, and as I said, actually promised to really, together with us, in the framework of the Democracy Action Plan, which was adopted last December, we will work together on a directive, on an EU-wide directive to install union-wide minimum standards of protection against slaps. And I think this would be the key instrument we would need to really find the right safeguards, to find the right protection, to give the guarantee to individual journalists, media outlets, representatives, or also individual citizens. We have seen this now in countries such as Kosovo and Albania, where activists were threatened with a lawsuit with slaps and other instruments coming from companies, private companies, and also sometimes private individuals who feel threatened by media requests. So all this must be avoided, must be prevented in the future. And I see that there is an active group in the European Parliament working on this. As you said, the media group, working group, very much with my colleague from all kind of parties. There's a big cross-party alliance from EPP to the left, liberals, socialists, and us Greens included. So from that perspective, I think we are very well established in the European Parliament, but also on the EU level as such. I see that there will be a so-called own initiative report from two committees, Jure and Libe. Both of the rapporteurs have been appointed now. One will be Roberta Metsola, who is also now one of the vice president of the European Parliament from the EPP group, a very liberal, a very progressive colleague, of course, and a German one, Timo Wölken from the Social Democrats. So this is also and looks very, let's say, profitable, and hopefully this will be a very fruitful cooperation with the colleagues and with you, putting together a good draft for an EU directive against SLAP. So the situation now is rather depressing, but I would say with the legal framework being drafted in the Commission with Jourova on our side, with a clear agenda in the European Parliament, I'm actually pretty optimistic that we can achieve something within a reasonable time frame. And hopefully when we meet again in a year or something, we can already present the first results coming out of the INI report, but also with the first draft legislation coming from the Commission.
Thank you very much, Viola. we're keeping our eyes on the INI report. I think this is the latest development, and thank you for sharing some details. We were not aware that the rapporteurs are already selected, so it's good to know. I will now invite Maria to take the virtual floor. As far as I know, JFJ is the only organization that is supporting civil society to work specifically on SLAPs. And we were talking before this session that for organizations, I think it's extra work to start supporting a whole new field. So JFJ is a pioneer on this, and we would be grateful, Maria, if you can share your experience in supporting different projects on working on SLAPs with us. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, thank you for the introduction, Flutura, and I'm honored to be here today and to represent the Justice for Journalists Foundation, a UK-based NGO created to support investigations of crimes against media workers. As the foundation started its activities in 2019, our main focus was violent crimes against journalists, like murders, tortures, kidnappings, and other types of violence. These crimes are absolutely outrageous and have unfortunately become a normalized part of the political landscape and in the growing numbers of countries. We all know how effective these methods are to silence the voice of truth in order to hold journalistic investigations into corruption, financial and economic crimes, and abuse of power. However, our vigorous research and daily monitoring of crimes against journalists has demonstrated the surge of legal or rather quasi-legal cases against independent journalists. And by independent here, I mean, of course, independent from governments and financial and industrial groups who often own the media. It is because, so the question is why is the surge of these legal cases? Is it because the modern media became so ruthless in its slandering, lying about and framing honest officials and businesses? Or is it rather because the internet and novel information gathering methods gave unprecedented powers to the citizens, including journalists, to put the rich and powerful in the spotlight and demand greater accountability and transparency? We in the foundation believe it is the latter. Our conclusion is based on the in-depth analysis of the developments in the 12 post-Soviet states, where with the help of local experts, we monitor the attacks against media workers on the daily basis. The numbers speak for themselves. In 2020, out of total of 4,400 attacks against journalists, 10% were physical attacks, like the ones I mentioned earlier, murders and violent crimes, while whopping 72% of the attacks were attacks by judicial and quasi-legal means. If we take a country like Russia, 2017 saw 27 lawsuits brought against journalists, while 2020 saw already 204. This is a 10-fold increase. Reported physical attacks in the meantime increased by 29% in the same period. So 29% and 10 times. We started to dig deeper in the subject and discovered striking singularities in methods favored by the authoritarian governments and businessmen who enjoy their above-the-law status. Moreover, we also discovered the trans-border cooperation between the state security services in cases concerning extradition and kidnappings of independent journalists. I will give you just a few examples to put names behind the numbers. In 2017, freelance Azerbaijani journalist Afgan Mukhultari was abducted in Tbilisi, Georgia, then illegally moved to Azerbaijan, where he spent the next 3 years in jail on charges of illegal border crossing, smuggling and disobedience to the authorities. He was forced to flee to Georgia since in 2014 because he was persecuted for harshly criticizing Azeri government. Another freelance journalist from Uzbekistan called Bobomurod Abdullayev was arrested in Kyrgyzstan in August 2020 on the extradition request from Uzbek authorities for disseminating materials that target the existing constitutional order of Uzbekistan via social media. And after spending a month in jail in Kyrgyzstan, was extradited to Uzbekistan. All of that despite the fact that multiple human rights organizations were voicing their concern about this, and the fact that he already spent several months in Uzbek jail prior to his flee out of that country. Another case, in October 2020, Russian independent journalist Irina Slavina committed suicide after publicly accusing Russian Federation in her death. This desperate act followed several years of legal and judicial harassment against the journalist, who was subjected to 7 legal attacks in 2020 alone. The most recent case in legal harassment and intimidation is another Russian journalist, investigative journalist, in fact, called Roman Anin, who in the space of 3 days was interrogated twice for several hours. His house was searched, all the computers, gadgets, and USB sticks were confiscated. And this is all happening because he is accused of violation of privacy of President Putin's right-hand man, Igor Sechin, who spent over $100 million to acquire a yacht for his young wife, Olga, in 2016. And of course, along with the emblematic case of Daphne Caruana Galizia, which has already been mentioned here, we know that she continued her brave journalism despite dozens of defamation and other legal cases initiated against her, and was eventually brutally murdered. All these cases demonstrate that the trend that is acquiring, unfortunately, the strength all over the world. JFJ, Justice for Journalists Foundation, has continuously supported investigation into Daphne's murder. And last year, we made a decision to dedicate more support to SLAP cases in the countries where something can still be done to counter the abusive power of untransparent wealth and unaccountable officials. In 2020, JFJ dedicated over $200,000 to support investigations into how the SLAPs are being used against journalists and free speech. We are currently supporting European Center for Press and Media Freedom in Leipzig. We support Foreign Policy Center in the UK, in London. We support Article 19 and Fundación para la Libertad de Prensa in Mexico, in Colombia. As well, we support individual media experts and researchers around the world to counter SLAPs. It is already evident that the SLAP issue is not well enough understood, or sometimes intentionally ignored by the governments, and there is a dire need to demonstrate the level to which this is a problem affecting the independent journalists. All programs we support typically include 5 main components, and that systematic approach proves effective for the long-term goals of making the intimidation of journalists via SLAP mechanisms visible and eventually illegal. So all the components are, as such, research and analysis, public awareness raising, stakeholder engagement, initiatives to limit the initiation or progression of SLAP cases, and development of potential regulatory and legislative reforms to prevent SLAPs at their source. Our findings help us to summarize the trend. They demonstrate that the journalists conducting investigations against corruption or abuse of power very frequently are threatened or faced with litigation for defamation, violation of privacy, libel, or in more authoritarian states, of course, is extremism, support of terrorism, or presenting a threat to the constitutional order. These cases very often involve large legal and reputation laundering firms based in the UK, like was mentioned today, and the EU. And they also touch upon murky financial schemes, large properties or yachts, offshore companies, transnational cooperation between state security services. In Azerbaijan and Malta, in Kazakhstan and the United States, in Italy and Russia, in the UK and United Arab Emirates, the corrupt officials and oligarchs are much closer to each other than it is allowed to be reported. In the global world, evil and corruption are transborder. We need to have a global vision and transnational understanding of quasi-legal mechanism utilized in SLAPs in order to educate the public and ultimately eradicate the corrupt practice of abusing the legal system to silence the truth. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for your contribution. I would like now to check whether there are questions. I think there aren't, based on what I see on the chat. If not, then I have some additional questions, and I would like to start with Per again. Per, we already had actually a question regarding more information about your case, and I know that several organizations and individuals have expressed solidarity with you and your colleagues. I would like to know just how important it is to have this solidarity when you're facing lawsuits, whether it helps at all, and whether there is anything that international organizations can do when journalists face legal actions like yours in this case.
Oh, thank you. It's of course tremendous to have the support and backing of all of the organizations that support us. It's very good for the morale, not least when we're trying to fight this claim. I think very much when it comes to being sued in another country, I think organizations and people with the know-how could help a lot. Just by sharing information, how will this process move forward? What do you have to do? Are there any friendly law firms that you could contact and maybe get help from? So all that, just to get a basic knowledge of what are we facing, because I don't think you as a journalist in a country, normally at least, you don't know all the laws in all the other different countries. What will happen if you will get sued in Malta or UK or US? You don't have that. You have to believe that you will only be prosecuted in your own country as a journalist. I think that all other possibilities are hard to cope with. So all support with information and also contacts in the different jurisdictions, that's very helpful. So if there's some kind of network that can help you to get a good lawyer and stuff, that's very helpful.
Thank you, Per. Viola, I wanted to ask you whether there are concrete steps that the European Parliament or perhaps your group will take in the, I don't know, coming weeks, coming months with regard to anti-SLAPP, and whether there is any advice that you would like to give to especially media organizations and also press freedom organizations on what can we do more in order to motivate the EU to act?
Well, I would say the initiatives, parliamentary initiatives, different resolutions which we have voted on and which were ratified by the European Parliament were mainly on behalf of your initiatives, you and your colleagues. So I think if somebody is active, it is you. So you are, let's say, a role model for a positive form of lobbyism and making sure that the European Parliament is aware of the, let's say, practical situation of many journalists in different countries, and really making sure that we take notice of the sometimes very, very critical situation, as Maria has said. I mean, there are countries where actually, I mean, any kind of independent voice, any kind of independent journalist is under threat, or even, I mean, sometimes commit suicide or being murdered or yeah, in prison for decades. So the situation is still very, very difficult. But what we should do is definitely look for, I mean, what you do now on a private matter. So creating a fund where the legal fees can be paid off, as Per has said. I mean, he runs into personal bankruptcy. I mean, to really prevent this and to make it a bit harder for private companies, private individuals to threaten people and just to silence them because of the financial risk they run into. This could be something also from the European level. I know there is pros and cons, and they say, okay, if we have a financial assurance or any kind of financial fund which would then provide the journalist under threat, then it might be even more attractive for companies to go against them. So as a kind of competition, I mean, they would just increase then the fees of the lawyers, but I think that's very cynical, and that's not a thing. Some people even are skeptics whether the EU would be the level and would be the real institution to deal with this matter. But I think there are different articles in the treaty which could be used as a legal fundament or as a legal precondition to act for the Commission, such as the domestic market and also the equal judicial framework in the EU. So there is, I think, enough common ground coming from the Treaty of the European Union to work on this. In terms of your question concerning, let's say, concrete actions, no, I think the committees which I have mentioned will come up with an initiative report. That's already a very good start, and from therefore, I guess we will have more, let's say, food than for the legal implementation of what hopefully will come from the Commission. I know, I mean, we pick up a lot of individual cases, especially my colleagues in the media working group really collect all the individual cases when journalists are under threat, write to Jourova, write to the president of the Commission or to other commissioners to make sure there is any kind of public awareness and protection. But so far, we still wait for the draft of the directive from the Commission.
Thank you, Viola. It's always a positive news to hear that things are moving. And for us as a community, every time we discuss a potential EU directive, when we think of the Directive on Protection of Whistleblowers, the short name, then we are always hopeful that eventually we might have an EU directive. We have only 3 minutes left, and I would like to give the floor to Maria with a very specific question, which I think you addressed a little bit, but just to reiterate perhaps, do you plan to continue supporting projects and initiatives on SLAPs, or was this something that happened once and then it will end? What are the plans of JFJ in the future with regard to supporting anti-SLAP work?
Yes, absolutely. We do plan to continue to support this work, as we have been supporting the investigations into Daphne's case, as I mentioned before. We will continue to support the work of the European Centre. Of course, we work with Foreign Policy Centre, and this year for the 2021 grant program, we received already over 85 proposals, and that includes a lot of proposals also following the SLAPs from different countries, from in fact 45 different countries. So we will hope that our advisory board will select the relevant cases which we will continue to support this year and the years to come.
Thank you, Maria. We have a question, and I think this is addressed to Viola, since you are here on behalf of the European Parliament, although it's connected to the Commission. So the question is whether there is any estimation when could be a legislation draft EU directive finished. I know it's a difficult question, but since there is a question, perhaps just to address it.
Well, the problem, I am not a member of the jury, neither in the LIBE committee. That makes it a little bit difficult. While I could imagine that they have proposed or they have already given a timeline there or a schedule when. But from the letter of the Commissioner Jourova, I would estimate that this should be in the course of the year. I have no idea when. I know that, I mean, she was very busy with her digital, with her democratization action plan. So there was a lot in this. And there's also some reference, especially, of course, to free and independent media and safeguarding and protection those media. So she is keen to specify this in terms of SLAP. So I could imagine, because it is also her personal interest, as she has mentioned during the application speech. But to be honest, I can only guess. And what I understood, it should be until the end of this year. But when, I don't know.
Thank you. I think our time is up. So I would like to conclude this perhaps with three short remarks. First of all, thank you, Per, for sharing your experience. 2 years ago, when we started to speak to each other about SLAPs and cases of journalists, most of the journalists were very reluctant to share their this information, the fact that they are being sued or facing legal actions with the audience, with the public. And I think this looked at kind of as a stigma to them. So the fact that we are having more and more journalists sharing this information with the public helps in terms of mapping, but also addressing the problem. Thank you, Viola. As I said, you're a friend of us, and we count on your support. And thank you, Maria, for supporting anti-SLAP work. Before we go, I see we have present Jill Phillips, the legal director of The Guardian. She is one of the most wonderful and very experienced experts on defamation and also anti-SLAP work. She has been the chair of ECPMF Legal Affairs Committee for 4 years. Without her, we would not be able to have our legal program in place. So I would like to thank her for attending the event, never forgetting about us and following our work. Thank you again. And now let me hand over the floor to Ali Aslan, the conference host. Thank you again.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Futura, and your panel for kicking off day 2 in such great fashion. Welcome back, everyone. I'm delighted to be back with you after a first day, which was filled with great panels, great speakers, great documentaries, and of course, well-deserving winners of the Impact Award. Day 2, and you saw it just with the very first panel, is going to continue at that level. Much more to come. Great panels, great speakers also on day 2 of the Uncovered conference. For all the details, of course, you can always go to the main conference website at uncovered.ij4.eu. And also, let me point out, there's a networking room. We had it yesterday. It still exists and is available to you today, where, as the name implies, you can go meet other people, network, and mingle. This is going to be the second day after a great kickoff, after the first great day that we had. Stay with us, much more to come. Panel 2, Lessons for Europe, Cross-Border Journalism Around the World, will start in approximately 15 minutes. Don't stray too far. Stay with us. Looking forward to seeing you and welcoming you back here for Panel 2. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to day 2 and panel 2 of the Uncovered conference. According to Reporters Without Borders, Europe is the most favorable continent for press freedom. But of course, there are other countries, other continents, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, where the situation might not be as favorable for press freedom and cross-border journalism in particular. That is going to be the topic of this following panel, Lessons for Europe, Cross-Border Journalism Around the World. And I'm happy to yield the floor to the moderator, the chair of the session. She's the executive director of the International Press Institute, Barbara Trinfie. Barbara, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this panel, to the organizers. So basically, throughout the presentation that we heard yesterday, we got an opportunity to get a sense of the important investigations that were made possible by the IJ4EU fund in Europe. And indeed, we also need to consider that the IJ4EU fund has provided not only the necessary funds to allow journalists to dedicate time and resources to these investigations, but has also offered editorial support, different forms of trainings, as well as legal support to those grantees that have requested it. And this panel today is going to look at what the benefits are of cross-border journalism around the world, and what do we need to have in place in order to ensure that cross-border journalism can flourish. We have 3 great panelists today, and I kindly ask them to turn on their cameras. Catherine Gicheru, based in Nairobi, Kenya. Carlos Eduardo Huertas, based in Bogota, Colombia, and Carol Ilagan, based in Manila, in the Philippines. Welcome to the panel. While we wait for the panelists to come up, I also would like to encourage all participants to post your questions or comments for the panelists in the chat box. And I'll do my best throughout the discussion to turn these questions to our speakers. So let me start with you, Catherine. Catherine Kisharu is the founder of the African Women Journalism Project, which is dedicated to strengthening the voices of women journalists and driving coverage of underreported topics such as gender, health, or development issues. Catherine has also long experience as an editor in Kenya. You were the first woman to serve as an editor of the Nation Media Group, and you are also founding managing editor at the Star newspaper in Nairobi. Catherine, the African Women Journalism Project has members in 5 countries: Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, if I'm correct. And they work collaboratively on cross-border journalism project. My question to you is, why did you decide to work cross-border, and how is this making a difference in the type of journalism that you're generating? Catherine, I think you're still muted.
It just
Excellent.
makes sense. I mean, it made sense to us to be working collaboratively because we're facing similar issues, similar challenges in the 5 countries that we're targeting, we are working in. And the most interesting thing is that we as journalists are supposed to be kind of not only reporting on issues that concern everyone, but especially those ones who are living at the margins. So women, girls, the disabled, and others. And I thought, why not try and report on those issues? Because it also gives us an opportunity to say, for example, we have a problem in one country, and this is the community or the society is addressing that problem. That could be something that can be replicated in a second country. And working together with other journalists from the different countries, it means that then we are able to give more information. We are then able to kind of widen the knowledge, as it were, that exists in those different communities or societies. At the same time, it also helps us, some of the newsrooms, because of the financial troubles we're all going through, may not have the kind of expertise that we have access to or I have access to. So working together means that, or working collaboratively means we are able to share skills and expertise. For example, some of the newsrooms, the fellows we're working with some of the newsrooms do not have somebody who can actually analyze data. So if they can have somebody who can help them do the data analysis, then it means they don't really need to worry, we are not going to be able to do this story because we don't have this expertise. So there's that, as well as it really kind of, we are no longer living in a small little pigeonholed, these countries of ours. We are living in a global kind of society or economy or whatever you want to call it. And what is happening in one part of the world is going to have an impact on your side. So it's important that we actually start telling the human story, not the Filipino story, not the Colombian story, but actually telling the story of the human story, the struggles we're going through. And it didn't take the COVID pandemic to make us realize that. I think this is something that post should be the norm, not the abnormality. We should all be trying to work together to tell these stories. So that's, for me, it was just a given. The story, what is happening in one part of Africa has some significance in another part of Africa, or even another part of the world. So obviously, let's tell these stories together.
Great, great. Thank you, Catherine. That is a great cross-border. And I'll come back to you on that, but maybe let me move on to Carlos for now. Carlos Eduardo Huertas, you're one of Latin America's leading investigative journalists, and you're currently the director of Conectas, as well as the chief of party of the Investigative Reporting Initiative for the Americas, if I'm right. And Conectas is an accelerator platform that has become a reference for investigative journalism in the Americas because of its commitment to journalistic collaboration aimed at the production of in-depth stories. Catherine mentioned a number of topics, a number of issues for which cross-border journalism is relevant. According to your experience, when is cross-border journalism particularly relevant? And what do these type of cross-border collaboration entails in Latin America? On to you, Carlos.
Great. First, many thanks for the invitation. I'm so proud to chair this panel with distinguished group, with Carol, Catherine, and with you, Barbara. Well, that is a good question. In Conectas believe that the cross-border collaboration is a set of techniques, methodologies, and collective learnings that are applied according to the situation. We see collaboration from a broader perspective. First, the main trigger is solidarity. The second is capacity, and the third one is impact. Today, we have complex realities that permanently active one or all of them. Not only the realities that are born in the stories, such as transnational phenomena, but also the reality of the journalism and the media, as you mentioned when you started the panel. They need to improve their knowledge, they need to improve the skills, they need to share the costs. And that was very relevant, for example, in times of the pandemic times. They need to work together to complement information, and talent was very evident. I will share in the chat an example about the combination of them in examples that we are doing in Conectas. Let me try to look the chat. Okay, I put the one example, and this is in English, in Spanish, and in French too. Well, your question is, what do these cross-border collaborations entail? No? And I usually mention the same. No? Collaborative work imposes great responsibilities. It is like a body with many extensions. There are issues that compromise the physical security of those who participate. There are situations of digital monitoring and communications. There are laws that they pursue and legal risks. The contrasting work in many cases is complex. High standards are required, and the closing moments are sometimes challenging. The deadlines are sometimes very challenging. Doing it well implies being attentive and finding creative and effective solutions. For example, right now in Conectas Hub, that is the name that we have for our journalistic community, participating more than 115 journalists in 20 countries. And Conectas as an accelerator, we promote better journalism, help to provide resources, promote ideas for projects, and we participate journalistically to make the stories.
Thank you. That is really interesting. Let me move on to Carol. Carol Ilagan, you're a Filipino journalist reporting for and managing the editorial desk of the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, which is a Manila-based investigative nonprofit organization. And Carol, you also lead the PCIJ's collaborations with local, regional, and global news outlets. Carlos just mentioned the fact that cross-border collaborations are also relevant in case of whenever there are legal restrictions. So basically operating in restricting countries. So I was wondering, specifically looking at the Philippines and also all the press freedom hurdles that journalists are facing in the country, what is the specific value that you see for cross-border journalism in your region?
Thank you, Barbara, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here, and I can't agree more with what Catherine and Carlos have said a while ago. In the case for the Philippines, and of course the many other countries operating in liberal democracies or restricted or flawed democracies, I guess the context is corruption, crimes, and various forms of injustices continue to happen in plain sight in many countries and specifically in these countries. So within borders and also across borders. But cross-border collaborations, investigative collaborations can provide support for journalists who may not be able to freely do the kind of reporting needed in their own countries. So specifically for countries where you have issues with freedom of expression, freedom of information. But by sharing information, skills, technology, and platform, we can help each other ferret these stories out. Because as Catherine mentioned earlier, what happens in another country is linked or, has impact to what happens in another country. So there are ways on how to get information. Like just for example, we are working with the Pulitzer Center tracking the supply chain and its impact on deforestation. Of course, you can see a lot of links there because a lot of the supplies, for instance, come from the Amazon, Congo Basin region in Southeast Asia, and these are consumed, elsewhere. So information can be made available, not just, within our own countries. So in this sense, global investigations can put the spotlight on illegal or illicit activities done at the very local level. And when done right, these can compel key actors to act or put pressure on those who must be held accountable. In our experience, from the examples done by ICIJ, OCCRP, powerful criminals and people in authority may feel very comfortable, in their own countries, but not so much when they know that the world is watching. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Carol. Maybe let me follow up with another question. In a conversation we had just right before the beginning of this panel, you highlighted how in order to be able to carry out cross-border journalistic project, journalists and newsroom need to have reached a certain level of skills, a certain level of, also stability, financial stability, and all of that. So how can we I'm talking about, the donors community out there, but also you as journalists with your audiences and so on, what do you need in order to ensure that these type of cross-border collaborations are growing and in order to make also your community bigger?
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. I think we have to realize that doing collaborations, at least, from my observation with the pandemic ongoing and we're experiencing one crisis after another, it's no longer the future, but actually a necessity now, especially again with, the COVID-19 pandemic happening. It has limited our ways to do field work, for instance. And as I mentioned earlier, crimes like, for instance, illicit financial flows, online sexual exploitation of children, human trafficking. These are, crimes have also crossed borders. So for some of the most important stories of our time, there seems to be no other way to go but to collaborate because again, we're all connected. But, and this is a big but, a shift has to happen. And we have to consider that there are, of course, complex realities in our own countries. There are a lot of nuances, complex realities on ground. But I think it has to start with, of course, um, going up to management and even media owners. So I think we can frame it in a way that we can make this, like a good business case for newsrooms, for news outlets to do collaborations, because stories with impact come from collaborations, and stories with impact inspire trust from readers. And we know how much trust we've lost on our readers in the last few years. I think, well, at least in the experience of the Philippines. So that's one. But these efforts also need to be complemented with support from the international journalism community, and of course, maybe including the donor community as well. So that's why it's important that, apart from understanding these stories, understanding the problems, we need to understand how these stories were done, so we're able to replicate, or perhaps, see how we can apply the lessons in our own countries. And my last point is, to your question on perhaps how, the international community can help. I mean, this is not new, but this is more looking in the big picture and in the long term. Collaborations can only be as strong as its individual newsrooms, how independent and sustainable they all are. So media development has to continue, especially, in our part of the world, in Southeast Asia, in illiberal democracies. So this may cover, a variety of things like capacity and resource building, digital media training and integration, promoting diversity in the newsroom, and also creating and nurturing an environment that celebrates and also protects freedom of information, freedom of expression, and essentially public interest. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's interesting because, sorry, this is exactly our experience, also has been our experience with the IJ4EU fund in Europe, that also if you want, the success of this fund, of this project, was given by the fact that not only funds were made available to journalism, but also there was training behind, there was editorial support, as well as, intervention from organizations like IPI and many of our partners on press freedom issues whenever relevant. Let me turn to Carlos, because Connectas, I think, is offering precisely all this, is basically offering all the infrastructure that is needed for the type of cross-border collaboration that you're looking at promoting. I was wondering, do you see an opportunity for closer cooperation between news organizations, journalists, and civil society on the other hand? And how can this cooperation between these two groups promote cross-border journalism?
Yes, that is very interesting experience. Usually, the relationship between the media and civil organizations has challenged. No? Organizations distrust the ability of journalists sometimes, and they only want to install their pre-release. For the part, for the media, for the journalists, we only want to approach the organizations as a sources. No? The paradox is that we are rowing for the same side, and the question is how to establish better relationships to build something together. That is why we have been building those bridges for some years. For example, in this moment in Dominican Republic, we are working with Participación Ciudadana, another civil societies organization, on stories that help control resources for the pandemic. Another example with Transparencia Venezuela, we elaborate a work in which they contributed a powerful database that was built by lawyers who for a long time and in different countries review hundreds or perhaps thousands of files, no? Something that the journalism never can do, no? We don't have the knowledge, we don't have the expertise. And our journalistic work involved a dozen of members of Connectors that, together with the leadership of Solari and David Gonzalez, that was our editors, allowed to identify the issues that were developed from journalists. The result is the investigation called Chavismo Inc. that I'm going to share the link to. Yeah, and this is a wonderful job, and I agree. I think it's a wonderful experience because at the end, the investigative techniques for the organizations were added with those of the journalistic production. And the result that helped to expose the fate of more than, in this case, more than $5 billion of Venezuelans around the world. What is the key? The key is to raise even more the level of demands, especially to clarity in each step, because there are things that in and relations with in between journalists one takes for granted, but with organization we must not forget that although we row for the same side, the purpose are different. No, as a journalist, we want to share good information. They want to do advocacy or they have other interests, but it is possible, and the results are very interesting. Yes, I share the link now.
Great, thank you very much. And I see that Lucy is congratulating you for the Petrofraude project that you have carried out, Carlos. Catherine, what about Kenya and the region you're active in? Is there cooperation with civil society, other civil society organizations, or even academic institutions as part of your work? And is this beneficial to journalism?
Yeah, it's quite, I mean, it's a no-brainer again, just like Carlos said. Civil society organizations tend to have a lot of information which is not readily accessible to journalists. They actually may have data which you cannot get, but which they've been able to get or they've been able to collect. So at the end of the day, it doesn't, I mean, you need to work with civil society, and we've been working with civil society organizations. For example, those ones that are working within the human trafficking space, and those ones who are dealing with SGBV and GBV, and also health, access to reproductive health services, for example, in Uganda. And the reason for this is because they do have the expertise we may not have. They have the data or the information you don't have. And the other thing is also when it comes to making trips or going out into the field, their 1 shilling, your 1 shilling is 2 shillings. What they want to go on the ground as a civil society organization is limited by their own resources, because they also don't have an end in resources in terms of finances. Your newsroom also is constrained because of money. So when you work together, when you collaborate, or when you work with civil society, you can actually go further. The only caveat, obviously, is that you as a journalist maintain your editorial independence. It doesn't mean that you will be singing their song or doing their advocacy for them. Because like Carlos said very clearly, we are all on the same side. We're all working together for good, for the good of the communities we are serving, whether I'm coming at it from the point of view of a civil society. Journalists, we are here to try and fight for the betterment of our people or our communities, for good things to happen, to expose the bad things that are happening, to hold those who are doing them to account. And it's the same thing, although civil society comes at that same struggle from a different side, but we're all walking the same road. So it really is a no-brainer working with civil society and even academia, because for example, some of the research we've been, especially around the COVID pandemic, there's been a lot of research done, but not in our space about ourselves. So really looking and identifying the scientists who are working on these problems from our context, being able to interact with them. For example, getting experts from the Africa CDC to tell us about the COVID pandemic, because everybody is talking about the pandemic from this global scenario, but I need to get to understand so that I can inform my audience that what is happening has a relation to what is going on here. So that when everybody is saying, oh, we've got this vaccine, not the other vaccine, how are you going to deal with that? So you need to work with academia as well as civil society. And for me, it's a relationship that bodes the best. I mean, I think it's the best thing that can happen, especially when it comes to collaborative, whether it's investigations or just normal storytelling. Working with civil society opens doors that might otherwise have been closed for you as a journalist. And they also have access to information we really need and we may not be able to get. Why struggle too hard when you can get somebody who can help you walk or lift that load? So that's the way I look at the relationship, and that's how we've been working with CSOs and academia.
And that's a great approach, Catherine. I see there is already a question in the chat, and I'll get to it in a moment. Maybe before we go to that, I wanted to reflect a little bit on what you all have just mentioned with regard to cooperation, collaboration, and all of that. I mean, we also know there is also a lot of competition in the journalism field. Media outlets are business, and we have competitors as well as between journalists. Is this an issue, and is this maybe less of an issue in the moment we work cross borders because our competitors tend to be within the national borders? How do you see, or is the approach to journalism just changing? And because it has become so difficult to do journalism, we have understood that we have to collaborate more, and so we have to give up on we have to forget about competition because something else, there is a common goal there. And I just wanted to understand how you see this issue. Maybe starting with you, Carol.
Hi. Yeah. That is one of the complex realities also that we have to face in our own countries. And I see, and I think, my colleagues in the Philippines would agree, if you're talking of corporations, definitely competition is very high. But as you said, this is less of a problem if you're working with another news organization in another country, because you aren't direct competitors. But the way I'm looking at it, as I mentioned earlier, I think for us to go over this hump, or this stumbling block, if you will, is make it a good business case. So if we're talking of media corporations, because like for example in the Philippines, PCIJ, we do collaborations with media corporations because they don't see us as a direct competitor because we are an investigative nonprofit. But again, if we're looking at make this bigger, if let's say the major news outlets work with community newspapers, and again I think that would really be able to do powerful collaborations and stories. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it can be made as as a good business case, because again you will be able to produce stories that make impact, and it also lessens the like in the Philippines, it's very politicized. Like one media organization is branded as anti-government, but if you work together, then readers, viewers will understand that they're not doing this for a particular purpose of taking down government, but because this is recognized, this story is being covered because it is an important story. Thank you.
Right. Thanks. And sorry, while I have you on the microphone, Carol, do you work with freelance journalists normally, or also because you mentioned newsrooms as well?
Yes. Thank you, Liana, for the question. Yes, we do work with freelance journalists, and this is actually very advantageous for us because as an investigative nonprofit, as you all know, we are a small organization. So we have few reporters in-house, but we do have a pool of reporting fellows, and these are all freelance reporters. So in a way, it works both ways because again, because we're a small organization, we can't hire a lot of full-time reporters. So that's why we tap freelance reporters, and it's also an advantage because these freelance reporters have a lot of expertise in whichever beat or topic or issue that they've been covering for many years. So if anything, we find them as kind of like our expert journalists. If let's say covering the criminal justice system, covering health issues or education issues. So yes, we do. Thank you, Liana.
Thank you. And thank you, Carol. What about you, Carlos? First of all, do you guys work with freelancers? And secondly, is competition either between newsrooms or between individual journalists an issue for you? Is it a hurdle, an obstacle? Oh, your mic is muted.
That is a very good question, no? Because the base for the collaborative work is the trust, and you need to know the people. And for that reason, in Connectas, we invest a lot of time, to build a strong community, people that we teach for a long time, that we are sure that they understand the methodologies and the techniques that we use, and then they start to work with us, and they start under Connectas umbrella, work together. That is the technique, no? And actually, we work with a lot of journalists. Some of them they are staff media, some of them are freelance, and for that reason, we have a strategy called Connectas Hub. But right now, this year, we are going to start something that we call ARCO, ARCO, which means Connectas Regional Actions. And we are looking for a closer job with the media. When then their first emphasis is to show then what they earn now, well focused in collaboration, produce very good results that increase prestige for the media and increase readerships and for the people that has skill in the management, they can be translated into the forms or financing. No, it is interesting because collaboration sometimes is easier in cross-border landscape. Sometimes are more difficult inside the same country. No, that is very interesting experience. For that reason, we are working to change that old metaphor that talk about the lone wolf, no, that the era is over. I would like to complement it. I would like to say that the age of the wolves is over. Well, the wolves, when the wolves are not alone, they act to our impact. And we prefer the metaphor for the ants, no, where each one contributes a piece to allow a better understanding of the reality. We are concerned how the new ecosystem in the media, in the journalists, looks like a pack of wolves, no, not long, a pack of wolves, and we scare about that. We prefer the ants, and we look at ants, 100 ants in Latin America, and we are open to work together with everybody.
I like your quote that the age of the lone wolves is over. I don't know how journalists see that, to be treated as ants rather than wolves now, but no, but I think it's clear what you mean, and I agree that we also see a difference in the approach to journalism within our network. It's really I think that many journalists across the world has understood that either we work together or we are going to succumb together. So it's a big topic. Catherine, great to see you're back. Yeah, what about your region? first of all, exactly, do you work primarily with freelance journalists? Is your network made of freelance journalists or of journalists who are operating on staff as part of newsrooms? And secondly, is competition an issue that you face?
I'm sorry about that. We had a power outage. Keeps on coming and going. Not to worry. Anyway, yeah, we work with a few freelancers, but a lot of the journalists we work with come from different newsrooms in the different countries where we are at, but they all don't come from the same newsroom. And one of the things we found is there is obviously competition, and that is a huge thing. Every journalist wants to break the big story on their own, and the newsroom wants to be the one that does that. But the way we've worked it is such that, for example, if it's an issue that has to do with one country, we work with one of the fellows in that country, not the three fellows looking at that issue from the same country. So we work, for example, a Kenyan, a Ugandan, and a Nigerian, and a Ghanaian would work on one story, but they would publish on their different news outlets. We have freelancers also, but because we help, what we do is we help them pitch the story to the different publications in their own country so that at least they can get published, so that it's not like it's not going to get published. So if one of the fellows, some of the fellows are freelancers, once they do a story or once they work on a story, we pitch it to a local news outlet so that then they can publish that, because we also want to make sure that these freelancers have an opportunity to put their work out there. And then in other situations, like in Tanzania, where COVID was, I know it wasn't happening, depending on which day of the week. But anyway, we found a way around that by getting the reporters in Tanzania to write stories about COVID, but we wouldn't publish in their news outlet because obviously it would be problematic for them, would publish it in other news outlets in other countries. So in a way, it's trying to figure out what makes sense, how, and what. But we do definitely have freelancers, but the idea is to give these women journalists an opportunity to put their work forward. And that's the whole reason why we encourage freelancers to work with us, because from there they can go and do other things, but they also develop the expertise that comes from working on specific stories which they're interested in, and then being able to share that outside. So a few of them have actually got opportunities to get jobs, because jobs are not happening. They are cutting down jobs. So if you can get your way into the newsroom at this particular time because of your expertise or because of the content that you're able to produce, that's a plus. And I think that's the way to look at it. Another way of looking at it.
Great. I think. Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I think I mentioned about the competition.
Yeah.
I think there will be instances where it's better to work, I call it working downwards. You work with a local, maybe community media outlet. You will be able to get the local person to actually learn something. You can teach each other something from the local. The working parallel and major news outlet and another major news outlet, that one is not going to happen unless there is really, like Carol says, business sense for it. What are the dollars? The dollar signs at the bottom of it. What value? And that's why sometimes it's easier to do, I call it working downwards or down up. So you work with community to mainstream or mainstream with community, or parallel, outside. Yeah. So that's
Great.
the way I look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think these are really great lessons learned, like example on how to go around some of the obstacles. And I think that what all of you have highlighted is that there is a value not only in the journalistic cooperation, the cross-border cooperation, but also having organizations like the Africa Women Journalism Project or Connect Us or the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism coordinating this, making sure that you know where and help journalists identify where can they find the skills that they need, where can they find a news outlet that can publish when they cannot publish in their own country and all of that. So I think this really highlights the need for the type of infrastructures that your organizations are offering. Now, we just have 3 minutes to go, and we still have to take a photo, I'm being told by the organizers. But maybe if you can, each of you in 1 minute highlight, if you had one wish, one thing that would really help you in the work that you're trying to do, what would that be? Starting with you, Catherine.
Okay, I would say actually getting, I don't know whether you want to call it the capacity building, and also being able to come up with a business model that makes us sustainable. Because at the end of the day, at some point, somebody will switch off I don't call it a tap, but we need to be able to present a business case for what we're doing. Collaborative journalism needs to be able to support itself. And if we can find a way of, whether it's a hybrid kind of funding model where we're making money, but you're also getting additional support from donors or something. So that for me would be that.
Thank you. What about you, Carol?
I guess for me, similar to what Catherine said and what I mentioned earlier about how media development, this has to be, complemented by, help from the international journalism community and perhaps, the donor community as well. If anything, perhaps the kind of, foundation or anchor, what to do next is there's this popular quote by Toni Morrison that, which I think is the center of, in journalism, that if you have some freedom, you free somebody else, and if you have some power, you have to, empower somebody else. So in that sense, I think that's kind of, the spirit of collaboration also is, helping each other. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks. Carlos, what would be the one wish you would like to see coming through to help you in your professional efforts?
Yes, I believe that the key factor is what helps us to build better networks. What do we need? For example, information is key, but this data without the ability to analyze and process is not the same. And without resources to do, it's also something essential. There is talk of technology resources, but perhaps the most expensive is the resource that pays the time of those who participate in these efforts. No, sometimes programs, etc., put a lot of attention in put resources in databases, in access for technology, but the time for the people, good people, good talents cost money, and you need to take enough resource, to maintain the human talent. The organizations are nothing without human, and that's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for this. And unfortunately, we are coming to an end, but I would like to thank you all. This has been, I thought it was really interesting and really inspiring. Congratulations for the work that you are doing. It's so important. And thank you for the lessons learned. I've learned a lot indeed. We need to still take a screenshot, I understand. So maybe 3, 2, 1 now. I think that's it. And I'm heading it back to the host. Thank you so much for the organizers. And thank you so much, Carlos, Carol, and Catherine. Good luck.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Carol. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Barbara. Indeed, I can only echo what you said, a very informative, highly educational session on the challenges journalists in Africa, South America, and Southeast America are facing when it comes to cross-border journalism. A very valuable panel indeed. Thanks so much, Barbara, for chairing it in such a wonderful way. Two down, two more to go. Once again, we'll break for approximately 15 minutes. Don't go too far because we'll be back with the third panel of day two. It'll deal with innovation in cross-border journalism. The panel will address cutting-edge investigative techniques that promise to keep cross-border journalists ahead of the curve. That'll take place less than 50 minutes from now, right here. So please don't go anywhere. Looking forward to welcoming you back here shortly for panel 3 of day 2. Hello, everyone. We're back. There's no stopping. Even on day 2, we're back to back with high-level, very informative, great panels. This one, of course, the upcoming one, is certainly not going to be an exception. It'll deal with innovation in cross-border journalism. Certainly, I'm very much looking forward to it, curious to hear about what the speakers have to say, and happy to yield now to the chair, the moderator of the session. It's none other than the chair of the European Center for Press and Media Freedom, Yanis Kotsivos. Yanis, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, and I'm really glad to be here with you in this afternoon, and I'm very much looking forward indeed to having this discussion about a term that for people of my professional age, I'm a journalist myself, has been rather complicated, rather challenging, but we are very much tempted to use it quite often, though I'm not always sure that we really do know what we are actually talking about. I mean, some of us have started working in newsrooms that had no internet connection, so you can easily realize what kind of major steps we had to take to adapt to the new situation. But have we actually adapted? Have we actually been familiarized in the way that we should? So I think that today's panel with our speakers will enlighten us on the real issues of the innovative part in journalism, because I do think that you'd all agree it goes far beyond using the tools that we sometimes like to use. It goes beyond having the right newsroom equipment and having the right education. It goes into the very narrative of journalism, into the very structure of the inquiry tools that we use. And all of our speakers today certainly have a lot of things in common, but there is one point that makes it even more important for us, that they have been sharing their expertise under the framework, within the framework of the cross-border journalism as implemented through the IJ for EU project. So I would really like to go on and welcome our panelists today. We have with us together Kishan Chan, who is a researcher at the Forensic Architecture. We have Bashar Deep, who is an open source intelligence specialist working for Lighthouse Reports, and who has actually also worked on the IJ for EU funded investigation Frontex at Fault, an extremely interesting topic, actually. And judging by my origin, you can probably realize that I have a very special interest in it. And we also have Hazel Sheffield, who is a freelance journalist based in London, and she worked on the IJ for EU funded investigation Money to Burn. So I'd like to welcome you all, and I would like to start with a round of introduction. Each of you would, I would like each of you to present themselves, to tell us what you are doing and how you are affiliated to the cross-border journalism projects that we are talking about. And I suggest that we start with you, Kishan, if you're all right with that.
Hey, yeah, that's great. I'm just going to share a few slides just to give you an idea of what forensic architecture does. So if you just bear with me. Can you see my screen? I'm going to assume that you can all see my screen. So I'm Kish. I'm a researcher at Forensic Architecture. I've been with them for 2 years now. I'm architecturally trained, but specifically in forensic architecture. So we are an independent research agency based at Goldsmiths, University of London, utilising spatial and media analysis to investigate state and corporate violence worldwide. So from war crimes to violations of human or environmental rights. We're now a team of around 20 people of various backgrounds and disciplines, obviously including architecture, but also filmmaking, art, programming, and others. And to aid this discussion, I'm just going to give everyone a quick flavour of what we do through one of our recent projects. So we recently published our investigation in collaboration with media outlet Madame Massa. And in this investigation, we're able to use the boom of the explosion as a three-dimensional clock, which itself is in a continuous transformation with a unique but discernible shape at each frame. And by cross-referencing each video source and using temporal markers such as the spherical explosion and the flash of light from the blast, we can place it in an accurate source 3D model of the city. And from this, we can build a spatial and temporal account of the incident. So by defining and analysing those different phases of the smoke cloud, we could then use that to build up a layout of the materials burning inside, namely the position of the central stack of ammonium nitrate, the fireworks and the tires that are stored in there. So by using photographs published by the New York Times, we can map a total of 240 bags of ammonium nitrate in the space. And given the direction of the fireworks and the edges of the stack, we can infer the position of the remaining 2,000 bags. And then finally, using this spatial layout, we could then judge the haphazard and carelessly stored bags of ammonium nitrate against internationally accepted benchmarks. So therefore, what we're kind of doing is using our very specific skill set of an architect in spatial analysis to then kind of shift the burden of responsibility back to the state and governing bodies. So that's what we do in a nutshell.
Thanks a lot, Kishan. It's really top technology to some of us. I'm sure there is room for improvement that you're already exploring. But my question to you is there room for what we might call traditional reporting, traditional journalism in that scheme that you're using?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we rely heavily on journalists to provide us with
in what way?
So, for example, this collaboration with Madame Massa, we needed someone closer to the site, closer to the ground, who understands the context a bit more, to really add the kind of nuance political understanding surrounding Beirut and Lebanon to the project. And not only that, but we also relied heavily on their kind of their networks and sort of traditional journalistic toolkit of gathering sources, talking directly to other sources on the ground to get information that we can then spatially analyze. So it's a very collaborative process between their investigative journalists and our kind of architects to really pull together that project and kind of uncover the layout of inside the warehouse.
Thanks a lot. I think that we can go on with you, Bashar. Would you please go on and introduce yourself and your tasks and your involvement at the IJ4EU investigation Frontex at Fault, if you'd like.
Can you hear me? All right, so my name is Bashar Deeb. I'm an open source investigative journalist. I work at Lighthouse Reports, and a big part of what I do is to look for crucial pieces of evidence online, to look at social media posts, to try to verify videos and footage, where it was taken, when it was taken, things like that. I started as a hobbyist, but then with the help of the Lighthouse Reports, my colleague, I kind of took it further. And with the involvement in the Lighthouse newsroom, I had the chance to develop my skills. So shall we speak about the Frontex investigation? All right. So to give you like a bit of context on this investigation, in the beginning of 2020, Greece started applying what it calls aggressive surveillance policy in the Aegean. So in reality, this was translated to a very big number of pushback reports. In some of these cases, the migrants were intercepted in Greek waters by men with face masks and balaclavas who would raid their dinghies, cut their engine, transfer them to life raft, and then tow them back to Turkish waters. In some other cases, things were a little more extreme, where migrants have indeed managed to reach Greek islands and were returned very quickly to Turkey with the same methods. So we at Lighthouse Reports have started investigating these violent pushbacks and these incidents starting from April 2020, and with some publications at the end of April and the beginning of May, we have proved beyond any reasonable doubt that multiple groups of migrants have reached Greece and were deported very quickly without their consent, without even being offered the chance to apply for asylum. Now, considering like the geography of the place, the distance between Greek islands and Turkish shores, where migrants usually choose to make their passage, is somewhere between 5 to 10 kilometers, which is a very close distance if you compare it with the distance, for example, between Libya and Malta. So these pushback operations became a normal sight for locals of the Greek islands. It became very normal sight for them to witness such incidents while they were relaxing on the beach or sitting on their house balcony. On the other hand, we had Frontex, which when was being asked about this kind of violation, always denied knowing about these practices, not to mention being involved in them. So for those who don't know about Frontex operations in the Aegean have a very big capacity. There are always multiple vessels patrolling all the points where the migrants are making their passage. Frontex also operates aircrafts of the surveillance aircraft over the Aegean, and they also have surveillance stations sat on top of the hills with thermal cameras, so they could see everything that's happening. So it didn't really make sense to us that they weren't aware of this wrongdoing by Greece. So we came up with a methodology that would attempt to test these Frontex claims. We partnered up with Der Spiegel, Bellingcat, ARD, and Asahi TV from Japan to start investigating whether Frontex is involved in any wrongdoing in the Aegean Sea. So the methodology we came up with was to collect videos taken by migrants themselves and published on activist pages while they were on the travel, while they were on the dinghy. We also collected coordinates which the asylum seekers would sometimes share with rescue organizations when things get a little bit rough in the sea, organizations like Alarm Phone or Aegean Boat Report. But we also masked all this information with the rescue footage from the Turkish Coast Guard archive. So the result of this first phase of investigation was a very detailed spreadsheet which has a lot of material on every pushback we could gather information on. Our second step in the investigation was to figure out which Frontex assets were being used in the IGN during 2020. Now, this was not a very easy task because Frontex is not very transparent about its asset and wouldn't respond easily to FOIA requests. So we had to figure out these assets ourselves. So what we did was to go to social media, places like Instagram, and check for pictures tagged next to the ports. And you would be surprised how many of these pictures are there on Instagram. And in many of these pictures, we were able to spot a Frontex asset and add it to our Frontex asset database. So yeah, we also relied heavily on people from the ship spotting community who always share their work online. So like a little bit of technical details, almost every vessel has something called an AIS transponder, which sends its signal. This signal includes the location. This signal gets sent every few seconds or minutes or so. And similarly, the airplanes also transmit their location through what is called ADSB signal. So what we did was to gather all this airplanes and vessels data for the Frontex vessels and the aircraft and put them on one interactive map along with the coordinates of migrants that they had shared with the rescue organization. So once we had done this, we were able to see that in many cases, the Frontex vessels were very close from a pushback. This is something that makes it hard to them to claim that they haven't witnessed anything. In one case also, we were able to see that a Frontex flight was right above a very violent pushback, which we had investigated in details month before. Now it's important here to note that not all the Frontex vessels transmit their locations. Many of them prefer to operate anonymously for some reasons. So all we have series of videos from Turkish Coast Guard, which shows a Frontex Romanian vessel creating dangerous waves in order to push back migrants on a boat. This was supposedly on June 8th, so the only challenge was how to verify that this happened on the day that the Turkish Coast Guard claimed it did. So while the Frontex vessel in question, the Romanian one, was operating offline in the video, we were able to see another vessel, a NATO vessel, which was pretty much trackable on online services like Marine Traffic and Vessel Finder, and it was present on the same scene of the pushback. Additionally, the Turkish Coast Guard videos offer the site of the Turkish Coast Guard vessel radar, where we could see that a Portuguese Frontex vessel was also nearby of this event. So what we did was to take this screenshot of the radar, which shows the route of the vessels, and overlay it over on the actual route of the NATO vessel, and it was a total match. So this way we were able to say that on June 8th, we are pretty sure that there was a Romanian vessel actively endangering the safety of the dinghy, creating waves, and endangering the life of the migrant. Later on, the Frontex vessel would leave the scene, and the men with balaclavas from the Greek Coast Guard would come and attack the dinghy. On another date, we managed also to obtain a photo showing another Frontex Romanian vessel during a pushback. In this case, we have found survivors of the pushback who shared with us videos showing their boat without an engine. Also, the NATO vessel was present in this case. And with a similar methodology, we were able to verify the place and the date these pictures were taken. So to close this, the combinations of all the cases we had was enough to shed light on the activities of Frontex in the Aegean. After our reports, many other media outlets did follow-up stories on Frontex and these violations of human rights in the sea. Also, people within Frontex started whistleblowing more details about more cases, and nowadays multiple European bodies are investigating Frontex activities.
Thank you very much, Bashar. I find it extremely interesting. I do have a question though, and actually I rather share the question that one of our viewers has just shared at the chat session, and I strongly encourage all of you watching us to share your questions to the speakers there. And it's about the verification process that you would you please mute yourself while you're not talking, Bashar, because there is some feedback. Okay, some sound feedback. So what about the verification process that you use? Because you mentioned crowdsourcing as a way that you use to obtain information, which is a really well-known practice now and very efficient. And you also mentioned the use of pictures that you obtain through social media platforms and so on. But are you actually have a stage of verification before you go on and use this information?
Yeah, of course. Everything we do, everything we publish goes through a very long process of verification. So, like with the second case that I mentioned earlier, where we had obtained a photo showing a Romanian vessel being like exactly near the pushback, what we did was in the picture, there was another vessel which was trackable. So our Frontex vessel that we were interested in was not trackable on commercial services, but the other one, which is the NATO vessel, was pretty much trackable. So what we did was to check the metadata of the picture, check the route of the NATO vessel, and then compare it against the timing of the NATO vessel in the picture. So it was looking southeast, as far as I remember, and we had the metadata saying it happened at a certain time. And when we tried to track where it was at the moment the picture was taken, the vessel data showed that it was going in the same direction. This is how we verified the time of the picture. In regard to the place, like we could always see some mountains in the background, and this is very easy actually to verify. You just you can use the Google Earth 3D models and try to compare it against the mountains that are shown in the video.
Thanks a lot, Bashar. We'll possibly get back to you because yeah, it has been a great story, I can confirm, and with a lot of impact, as you all know, both political and in terms of journalism, because as you mentioned, a lot of media followed up and that actually operate to more information flowing around this extremely important situation that we have. Thank you once again, and now it's Hazel's turn. Hazel Sheffield, a freelance journalist who worked for the IJ4EU investigation, Money to Burn. Hazel, the floor is yours now.
Thanks so much. It's so nice to be here, especially among such an amazing panel. So thank you for having me. And thank you, Bashar. That was really fascinating. So I'm a freelance journalist working in the UK, and I was a grantee of IJ4EU with a project called Money to Burn, which was a multimedia cross-border investigation into renewable energy policies in the European Union. We were a team of 6 close-knit team, and there's 16 journalists in total on the project. We worked together for 3 months with the grant from IJ4EU to investigate the wood pellet industry, very rock and roll, after a tip-off from an Estonian colleague that a lot of the forests in Estonia were shrinking as Western European countries like the UK and the Netherlands had ramped up their imports of wood as an alternative to coal in our plants. So I think we're on this panel because we think we were innovative, although listening to those two previous presentations, you can be the judge. But we I think pushed the journalists' definition of innovation in certain ways. So in the process of our investigation, we employed a suite of open source encrypted tools to collaborate. We used a Nextcloud suite, which is like a Google Docs alternative, and we share files and they're organized files using a kind of Wikipedia called DocuWiki, where we could each see what the other person was working on, and therefore we didn't all do the same thing. We could divide our team and then collaborate using this platform because we could see what everybody else's work as it was happening. We also use Signal and Rocket Chat to communicate rather than Slack or WhatsApp, for example, for security reasons mostly. And we also embrace this idea of radical sharing, which basically means that you just trust your colleagues to see everything you're doing as you're doing it, which might not seem that innovative in other industries, but in journalism, where there has traditionally been an element of competition between newsrooms, and the idea that you wouldn't release your findings before they were published, that was somewhat interesting and unusual. We also used some geospatial platforms and tools to conduct our reporting. I've got a new puppy, sorry. To conduct our reporting before we were able to go to Estonia. So we used a platform called Global Forest Watch, which is real-time data on the world's forests. So you can see deforestation in real time using the satellite data. And we uploaded boundary files for Natura areas. So these Natura areas are protected under birds and habitats directives under the EU, so that we could see in Estonia, which was our principal place of investigation, how the forest mass was changing in areas that were supposed to be protected under regulations. And then using this data, we were able to decide where we wanted to go when we went to Estonia to start doing real, as we would call it, shoe leather on the ground reporting. And in November, late November, a small team of us, despite the coronavirus restrictions, made it to Estonia. And I sort of sat in this, it was a kind of Russian icons museum in Tallinn, with my OSINT expert on one end in the UK telling me, sending me this real-time satellite data, and my team out on the field in southern Estonia in the forests. And so I could say to them, you know, you need to go west a couple of fields or south, and you should see a clearing. And then they were reporting with some NGOs in the field on the condition of the forests, what the soil was looking like. We took loads of pictures. We were able to do 3D visualization, sort of street view almost simulations of what the ground looked like after the forest had been cleared, and what the kind of habitats for birds and animals looked like after the forest had been cut down. And our final story piece was published in partnership with VPRO, which is the Dutch public broadcaster, and we did a 10,000 word interactive feature, which we worked very closely with some Estonian developers to produce. So we were very interested in kind of the design of that story and how we could take the reader to the places that we had been to see for themselves what that looks like, that kind of reduction in forest mass and the devastation of that environment. And we published various iterations of the story with various, I think it was 16 partner media, or 16 journalists, about 12 partner media, including The Guardian in the UK, Zeit Online in Germany, Publico in Spain, a suite of radio broadcasts in the Netherlands and in Estonia, and lots of newspaper coverage in Estonia as well. And we have reason to believe that our investigation is being discussed at policy level in the EU when it comes to biomass. So yeah, we're still talking to each other as a team and applying for more funding to do other topics. But unlike the other two people, I think this was a fairly standalone team and investigation. Thank you.
Hazel, yeah, a standalone team, but you mentioned, before I do that, would you please, all three of you, turn on your cameras, because I think that it would be nice for people to be able to see all of us while we start a short round of conversation. Great. And of course, all of you watching us are going to ask your questions to the speaker through the session. You mentioned the standalone team, and you also mentioned the very open and transparent way of working. So everybody actually had access to the pieces of information that others were gathering. And that brings me to the question, is there room for such kind of work in big traditional media outlets? Or let me rephrase, or just try to go one step further. Is there room for actual innovation in the ways that you think for media? It's a question not just to Hazel, but to all three of you.
I'm losing you a little, Yanis. Did everybody else hear that? Or maybe you could repeat the question.
You couldn't hear me. Can you hear me now? Okay. So my question was whether there is room for working in the way that you use in this open and transparent and collaborative way, and if there is room for innovative tools usually implemented by small-scale teams for the big news outlets, for the big traditional newsrooms.
I'll maybe just say something briefly about that, if I may. Yeah, we were working with The Guardian, as I said, on our investigation, and we didn't come to them with our story until December, so after we'd been to Estonia, partly because we were afraid that we wouldn't get a commission from them if we came to them without all the stuff, you know, all the evidence, and we knew that we'd get a lot when we were there. And this presented challenges actually with our partnership with them, because I think lots of major newsrooms would rather have a hand in an investigation of that nature at the beginning, so that they can shape it and they can see where the information is coming from. It's a lot to ask of editors who are overstretched and their legal departments to come in at the end when you've already done a lot of the work. So I think I would probably go to a big newsroom earlier than we did. Having said that, if you're kind of unknowns, as we were, it's very hard to get the ear of an editor, especially one at a very big publication like The Guardian. So I think there's a really tricky balance there. I think your question hits on a real challenge of the kind of work that we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you, Bashar. What's your approach to this?
So, like the way we did our latest investigation, our Frontex investigation, like it has mainly to do with the way my organization, Lighthouse Reports, work. So we basically partnered up with the media that we did the story with, which are Spiegel, Bellingcat, and ARD from the beginning. And this is like the model that Lighthouse work on. because we're not a publishing platform. This puts us in a unique position to create newsroom and gather big media outlets to work at the same time. So basically, instead of having multiple journalists from multiple organizations trying to do a story on the same topics, basically, like you can, the way we do this is to gather all the energy and the resources of this media outlet and put it together in a way that will bring a better story to the reader, that will bring a story with more angle, maybe more local angle, depending on which outlet we are talking about. So yeah, I think this is the Lighthouse Report's approach to this.
Maybe I'll just jump in here, seeing as we're waiting. So just to talk a little bit about FA's approach to that. I think we come up against similar struggles because we often, if we find money for a particular project, by the time it's completed and we've done all of our research and kind of investigated the incident a bit more and have a spatial and temporal kind of like understanding, we're ready to publish. Often there's a bit of a clash there with big media outlets. So as Hazel was saying, they want a hand in the kind of production of the investigation itself. Whereas we often kind of collaborate with generally often not media outlets, maybe like lawyers, maybe the family, maybe other kind of investigative newsrooms like Lighthouse or Bellingcat. So we have come up against a bit of pushback from big outlets, particularly The Guardian, especially on Beirut. But with Beirut, we were collaborating with Madame Nasser earlier on, and then published with Mediapart in France, just on their YouTube channel though. I suppose that in the way that other projects come to life, the Gulzar case, for example, in which we collaborated with Lighthouse, we were already working in the region on pushbacks along the Evros-Meriç River between Greece and Turkey, and Lighthouse became aware of our work on that area and the kind of the asset library and all of the spatial research we'd done around the kind of the river and forest, and we were able to like bring that to the quite already established team of like Sky News, Lighthouse, Pointer, Bellingcat, and play like a slightly different role where we handed over a lot of that kind of maybe like open source investigation responsibility, media responsibility to others, and played a very like specific spatial analysis role. But yeah.
Thank you. I have one last question. When you're looking for partners, when you are looking for the right partners to build and to facilitate this cross-border collaborative reporting that we are talking about, what are your priorities? Are your priorities more related to technological skills and so on, or are you looking for people who have a journalistic background? I really wonder what the right balance might be for your line of work.
Is that the question directed at me?
It's a question directed to all of you.
Okay, sure. Maybe I'll just start seeing something muted. Yeah, so generally we bring the kind of most of the technological and maybe forensic, architectural, spatial understanding. whereas we, as I was kind of was saying before, we leave that kind of traditional journalistic investigation to the experts. So, for example, with Madame Mass, they were bringing us content that could be spatialized, or sources that could be spatialized, doing most of the verification for us, and then we kind of add on that extra level of verification in 3D and use kind of our skills to then build on top of that source. So I think generally when we're looking for partners, well, generally people come to us, so either be, as I was saying, the lawyers, families, victims' families, or media outlets. We're kind of looking for something other than our skill set. So generally it's kind of that traditional investigative role and a platform for which we can like publicize the work.
Thanks a lot. Hazel, what about you?
Yeah, I think for us, because we were concerned about the biomass trade, we wanted to work with publishers in some of the key countries in that trade. So some of the biggest importing countries, the UK is the biggest, we import the most biomass, and then the Netherlands and Germany. And then, of course, we wanted to work with a lot of Estonian media outlets because that's where we were focusing our investigation, and Latvia as well, which is a neighbouring country. And as the investigation went on, we had a core team which made up some of those countries. But as we developed our understanding of the trade, we figured out which other outlets and countries we needed to approach. And then we basically just did a lot of Googling to find out the best media outlets to, places where they had a strong environmental focus in the countries that we wanted to work with. So Portugal, for example, Denmark, we were unsuccessful. They were already doing a lot on biomass, and Sweden, places like that. So it was very organic in our case. As our investigation developed, we kind of grew the team to the 16 journalists it became.
Thanks. Thank you, Hazel. And finally, you, Bashar, before we session now, how are you going looking now for partners? What are you looking for?
So, picking partners is not exactly my responsibility in the organization, but I can tell you like few things that I know. That I think that when Lighthouse reports to investigate. So yeah, I think these are like the main parameters to select partners. But again, I'm not the right person to answer this question, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, Bashar. And thank you all for sharing with us this extremely interesting content. I think that all of the that you mentioned are very clear examples how innovation is actually integrated, structurally integrated in the understanding of cross-border partnerships and cross-border reporting. Thank you all of us for being with us, and all of you for sharing with us, and thank all those who followed this session that I hope that you found interesting.
Well, thank you so much to Yanis and his wonderful panel for highlighting the cutting-edge investigative techniques that promise to keep cross-border journalists ahead of the curve. Thank you so much. Well, day 2 is certainly rapidly advancing. This was already our third panel of the day. 3 down, 1 more to go, 1 final panel coming up after this short break. It'll deal, of course, with the very highly publicized, internationally newsmaking Ibiza affairs, and will take you behind the headlines. The people behind revealing the Ibiza affairs will be with us and will be sharing the insights behind the door, behind the scenes story. Very much looking forward to that. For now, we'll take yet another break, our final break of day 2. We'll be back here in less than 15 minutes with the fourth and final panel of day 2.
Sind wir da jetzt richtig oder bin ich da ganz allein? Ist da wer?
Bist richtig.
Ah ja. Okay. Ich war ganz allein jetzt, da habe ich nicht ausgekannt.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back from our last break on day 2 of the Uncovered conference. This will be our final panel of the day, but it'll be a very, very interesting one. The Ibiza affair will take you behind the headlines. As a matter of fact, the journalists behind the Ibiza affair will discuss the cross-border collaboration that led to the resignation of Austrian Vice Chancellor Strache and the film they have made about it, which will, of course, screen right after the panel, a story that made international headlines. So I'm very eager, very curious to hear from the journalists who helped discover and uncover this story. To moderate this session, I'm very happy to yield the floor now to the Director of Arena for Journalism in Europe and Data Harvest, Brigitte Alter. Brigitte, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and a warm welcome to Bastian Obermeier, Frederik Obermeier, and Florian Klenk from Süddeutsche Zeitung in Munich, the two Obermeiers, and from Falter magazine, Florian Klenk. We are going to talk about the making of the Ibiza affair, which started with a publication in Germany about an Austrian topic, which is not necessarily the way it starts, but it evolved then into a cross-border collaboration. Now, in order to get everybody on the hook, and we would now like to share a video which the organizers have gotten. Please show the video now.
Wenn du darüber hinaus einen TV-Sender noch lukrisierst, bestimmst du alles.
Dem Magazin Spiegel und der Süddeutschen Zeitung wurden Videos überreicht, die wir vergangene Woche vor Veröffentlichung einsehen konnten. Und diese Videos zeigen den heutigen Vizekanzler Heinz-Christian Strache und den freiheitlichen Clubobmann Johann Gutenus. Dieses Video wurde im Juli 2017, 3 Monate vor der Nationalratswahl, aufgenommen. Das wichtigste Thema ist die österreichische Medienlandschaft. Strache möchte Einfluss gewinnen auf die Kronenzeitung über eine russische Oligarchennichte.
Sobald sie die Kronenzeitung übernimmt, sobald das der Fall ist, müssen wir ganz offen reden. Da müssen wir uns zusammenhocken, müssen sagen, so, da gibt es bei uns in der Krone zack, 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 diese drei, vier Leute, die müssen gepusht werden, 3, 4 Leute, die müssen abserviert werden.
Heinz-Christian Strache bietet der Frau nicht nur die Kronenzeitung an, er sagt, man könnte vielleicht auch noch einen Sender möglicherweise privatisieren, weil, und das sagt er ganz deutlich, wir wollen eine Medienlandschaft wie der Orban. Das heißt, er möchte unabhängige Medien gerne unter seine Kontrolle bringen oder in dem Fall unter die Kontrolle einer Oligarchin.
Wenn das Medium in 2, 3 Wochen vor der Wahl plötzlich dieses Medium auf einmal uns pusht, ja, eben, dann hast du recht, dann machen wir nicht 27, dann machen wir 34. Ja, das geht auch nicht.
Er will also Macht über das Nationalheiligtum der Österreicher bekommen, die Kronenzeitung. Und dafür verspricht er ja etwas.
Das erste in einer Regierungsbeteiligung, was ich heute zusagen kann, ist, da hat er seine Gewinnaufträge.
Er sagt immer wieder, er möchte nichts Illegales machen. Er sagt immer wieder, er ist sauber, er ist nicht korrupt. Gleichzeitig schlägt er aber Dinge vor, die nicht in Ordnung sind.
Dann sage ich Ihnen, soll Sie nämlich eine Firma wie die Strabag gründen, weil alle staatlichen Aufträge, die jetzt die Strabag kriegt, Ziel haben.
Und er sagt auch, wenn ihr das alles gefällt und wenn ihr das politische Programm gefällt, dann können Sie auch spenden. Aber nicht direkt an die Partei, sondern es gäbe Vereine, gemeinnützige Vereine, wo man hinspendet.
Ja, das hat nichts mit der Partei zu tun. Dadurch hast du keine Meldung und Recht.
Die Spender, die er nennt, Waffenindustrielle, Glücksspielfirmen, Mäzene, aber auch Immobilienspekulanten, nennt er namentlich, sie bestreiten alle gespendet zu haben. Wir können letztlich nicht überprüfen, ob diese Angaben richtig sind oder nicht. Was wir überprüfen können, ist, dass dieses Video echt ist. Es ist vom Spiegel und auch von der Süddeutschen Zeitung und auch von uns überprüft worden, dass es Strache und Godinez ist. Er bestätigt auch, an diesem Abend dort gewesen zu sein. Er sagt, es war ein feuchtfröhlicher Abend, aber er habe immer wieder darauf hingewiesen, dass alle Gesetze einzuhalten sind. Strache und Godinez haben gegenüber der Süddeutschen Zeitung und dem Spiegel angegeben, dass sie dort nichts Verbotenes gemacht haben, dass sie weder Geld genommen haben noch Geld gefordert haben. Sie haben dort auch keine Versprechungen gemacht. Sie sagen, es war viel Alkohol im Spiel und ein rein privates Treffen. Die beiden wurden in eine Falle gelockt von Schauspielern oder von Leuten, die so tun, als wären sie russische Oligarchen. Und diese Villa war auch gemietet. Sogar die Autos, die davor gestanden sind, waren nur gemietet. Aus welchen Motiven dieses Video gemacht wurde, wissen wir nicht. Darüber können wir nur spekulieren. Es können alle möglichen Motive sein. Dieses Video zu veröffentlichen ist eminent wichtig, weil es zeigt, wie der heutige Vizekanzler und der heutige FPÖ-Clubchef, der damals immerhin Wiener Vizebürgermeister war, hinter den Kulissen denken. Wie sie über Journalismus denken, wie sie über die Medien denken. Wie passt es zusammen, dass man einerseits sagt, man ist nicht korrupt und nur für die Interessen der Österreicher da, aber gleichzeitig versucht man die Kronenzeitung, das mächtigste Medium im Land, an eine russische Oligarchin zu bringen, im eigenen Interesse. Ich möchte gerne eine Erklärung dafür haben, was diese Vereine sind, warum man gemeinnützige Vereine braucht, um die Partei zu finanzieren. Und ich hätte gerne, dass auch die Staatsanwaltschaft dieses Video anschaut und überprüft, ob hier schon eine verbotene Vorteilsannahme oder ein Einwerben von Bestechungsgeldern vorliegen könnte.
All right. I think there are quite a few German speakers here, and those who are not would know that cross-border collaboration means that we'll have to live with different languages, and we enjoy that. But anyway, Florian, you were interviewed in that video, and you live in the country where the scandal blew up with the video when it was published in Germany. Could you just very shortly tell our participants here why we should see a gentleman in a t-shirt arguing with his arms in all directions? Why is this a scandal? What did he say? You have to unmute it if you go to the blue button underneath at the bottom of your screen.
So now it worked. Yeah. Maybe I should start with the news of the day. 60 minutes before this conference started, the Corruption Authority of Austria told us that they filed an indictment because of bribery. So they charge him with bribery in a case that was uncovered because of this video. So it's the first indictment we have in Austria in the Ibiza case. So Heinz-Christian Strache, our vice chancellor, will have to go to court in a criminal proceeding, and the maximum penalty he can get is 5 years of prison. So this is really good news that the Justice Authority took this video and started investigation, and they brought it to an end today. So why is it important? Because of that, because this video was the kickoff of a huge investigation of the Austrian justice authorities that started to investigate. They investigated briberies, they investigated illegal funding of the Austrian parties, especially by a company called Novomatic, which is an international gambling company. And it started to investigate a lot of political issues, especially concerning the independence of media. And all in all, 2 days after Süddeutsche and Spiegel released this video, the government stepped down, resigned, which was the
a kind of reaction to notice. Yeah.
And one thing, if I may add, it wasn't the case. It may seem like, but we didn't publish this first in Germany. We published all together, all partners, the Falter, the Spiegel, and Süddeutsche Zeitung at the same time on Friday. So it was, we had received the video earlier, but then we worked hand in hand in the last week, and
all right. Thank you very
publication on the same day. Yeah, I just
Thank
want
you very much
to
for this
clarify that.
detail. Thank you, Florian, for contextualizing it. And then maybe over to you to tell us, how did you get hold of this video and how did it all start?
So, Frederick and we got contacted by someone who explained that there might be material showing that someone in the European government may be open for corruption. That was the info that we were given, and of course we were really interested. And so there was a first meeting where we got to see some parts of this video, so some of the crucial parts. And also we saw more elements that seemed that Mr. Strache was having a lavish lifestyle financed by his party, which his party didn't know, and some other stuff. So there were pictures with lots of cash in a car that we've been explained used to be his car. So like thousands of euros in cash in the back of his car. And we said that we'd be, hugely interested in getting the material in our hands and checking it to see if it's really, if it's authentic, if someone manipulated it, and if there's a public interest. And that was roughly a year before publication. But then we had to go through a hard time because we didn't get it in our hands for many months, and there was nothing that we could have done. So we just had to wait until the time was right for the people behind the video.
And did you know that you and or Süddeutsche and Spiegel were contacted, or did the source say anything about who else got the material?
Well, in the first weeks, it was only us, and we spoke back then already to Florian to have a first feeling if this video is already known, or what, if he also got contacted, and he knew that there was something, and there were already someone had tried to contact him, but then in the end didn't do it. And later on, Frederick and me learned that, like months after our first screening, if you may say so, we learned that they then also had approached Der Spiegel. And so we decided that we don't want to fight here. We don't want to compete. So we decided to better join our forces and work together on this story.
I think this is one of the really interesting aspects, that the competition, even though it's the same language area, the competition was parked and you decided.
Sounds like that easy. Hey, you have a scoop in your hand and you have to publish it, but this was not how this felt at the beginning. It took almost back until we got hold of the video, and that was for us the most crucial part, because only watching such a video is not enough to publish. We needed the video in our hands, and then the process of investigation started. We needed to check if it was falsified, if it's real.
You're muted. You're muted, Frederick. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
We had to check if the video was falsified or not. We had to check if it's really Mr. Gudenus and Strache or some perfectly tainted actors. We also had to translate the report, and we realized the fact that this is not something that you can do within a day or two. So for us, it was obvious that if we go into a rat race with the Spiegel or possibly other media outlets, this could lead to mistakes. And we realized and saw this as a story that could have huge impact for and we wanted to make sure that we do not make any mistakes, especially mistakes that we can prevent by taking the time to thoroughly investigating the video. That's why we approached and spoke with Spiegel and together with them make the decision that we join forces, although we are in general competitor, that this video is of such public interest that competition among media outlets because it's most important to thoroughly investigate it.
And when did you then reach out to Florian?
Several days when we already did investigate the video, but all of the fact, as we have already been in that we need his expertise, that he already heard about this video. And we have worked with Florian already beforehand on international collaborative stories like the Panama Papers. So we know each other, we trust each other, and we wanted to have an Austrian partner because it's an Austrian topic. And I think, especially in those cases, when it comes to details of economic and politics, you really need to have detailed insight in what's going on in Austria. And we didn't want to make any mistake. And the best mistake, the best way of preventing mistakes is to bring such a specialist as Florian and the Falter team into this collaboration when it comes to HT Strache. Because one of Florian's team has written an amazing book about him already. So we wanted to have the expertise of Florian and his team on board.
And you didn't understand the Viennese dialect Strache spoke. That's the fact.
I had hoped that you would not mention this fact, but he is of course right.
Which is
no, also we didn't want to get trapped somehow, and there are, you know, in the interior politics of every country, there are so many mines and so many traps, and we were, you know, we didn't even know Mr. Gudenus before we saw the video, so we were so far outside this world that we needed one from within.
And how did you then go about the cooperation between Spiegel, Süddeutsche, and Falter? Did you enter that what we know from other cross-border collaborations? You made an agreement, a team, and then agreed on the publication date and took it from there? Or tell us a little bit about the how you did it behind the scenes. Did you fight about Viennese dialects, or did you laugh about? Now you're laughing.
It wasn't that planned, as we usually want to do projects, bigger projects, because we receive video kind of spontaneous, so we didn't know when this day would come, and so then we had to be, you know, as fast as possible and as thoroughly as necessary, and that means we were working, you know, for many days in a row. And we had already set up team at the set, and the Spiegel had also designated members of their team, and so we decided together, of course, that we would approach the Falter now, and then we divided the work. I mean, as you do in most collaborations. So we all members of the team from Germany were watching the video and transcribing. So we knew what we were talking about, and we were re-watching the crucial moments over and over again to be really sure what was said. And then also when the Falter was on board, they re-watched. Then they explained as well. They didn't exactly say what you think. It's a saying, for example, in Viennese. And so that in the end, we had a kind of a transcript that we could work with. And we even we knew that the other side would scream and yell fake news, you know. So we tried to verify as much as we could, and I think Frederick is going to explain in a second because he's the specialist about the ears of Mr. Strache. But what I can say, we had someone who spoke Russian and was also translations in court, and so we had her watch the crucial parts in Russian and translate and in a written way. So we had it all what was said in Russian, and then we took the parts that we wanted to cite, you know, all the quotes we showed to a lawyer, an independent lawyer, and we made him watch the video and read the quotes, and then he had to certify that what he was watching was what we had in the quote, so that we had certified quotes, which may sound strange, but we knew that they would say, you know, I've never said that, maybe you misheard, whatever. So that was how we went on, and now to the ears, Frederick.
Well, yeah, the ears were a perfect cliffhanger.
Yeah, the ears were super important. Also, we are making a lot of fun about them now, but at the beginning, I mean, we are now knowing that Gudenus and Strache are on this video because they both confirmed. But one of our fears was them claiming, hey, that's not me. It's like me, but it's not me. And you know how Hollywood works and stuff like that. And we all know that we are living in a time of deep fakes where you can get Mr. Obama saying things that he would never say and getting Mr. Trump to say things that he will also never say. So we approached, the Spiegel approached, and we approached independently another expert who is normally certifying in front of German courts when it comes to identifying individuals on surveillance cameras. And I must admit that I was a little bit naive. I thought we would give this person some pictures of Mr. Strache and Mr. Gudenus and the video, and then this person would say, yeah, that's them, like in a scientific way. But this expert immediately came to speak about ears, and I was like, what? If you really want to do me this job properly, I need a picture of Strache's ear from the front, from the back, from the thing from Mr. And we were like, what expert are you? And he's like, yeah, and one ear. And he wanted to compare the ears of Mr. Strache and Mr. Gudenus from press and news agency photos with the video. And he then, in the end, came to the conclusion, what we all know, yes, it was Mr. Strache and Mr. Gudenus. And what we also asked several independent experts is to basically check if cuts in the video, if there is hints for any manipulation. And the experts that we approached came to the conclusion, no, there are no hints for this.
There are some questions, but we'll get back to that later, because now I would like to hear how you went from analyzing the video to then following up on what was said there, because that would need some, I mean, the first thing is the verification, and I like this idea of looking into details like ears. That's really instructive. But how did you go from there? I mean, there were quite a few things were said that would need further investigation to prove whether there was anything about that or not. That's maybe a question to Florian. How did you're muted again, sorry. There you are.
So I think in the video we saw three major issues. The first issue was how Strache told about the money he got for his party, the financing of party, and he told that he named special companies that gave money to the FPÖ party, and he described how it works, so that they have like private unions, and the people could put money in, and then they put the money to the parties. That's the first thing. The second thing was that he wanted to sell the Kronenzeitung, which is a major newspaper in Austria, which is a very powerful newspaper. About 30 to 40% of Austrians read it, and he wanted this Russian lady to buy it and to fight in favor of the Freedom Party. And he said, when you buy it and when we come to power, you get a lot of jobs in the public from the state. And he named some company where he will get the jobs off and give it to this Russian woman. And this was the moment I knew that he has to resign, because this was open corruption. And there were some other points where he just discussed his political issues. He talked about Mr. Orban, and he talked about how he financed his party with gold, for example, or there was some gossip around. But I think the most important parts were those two. And so it was on us to ask him if this is true what he says. And he said, well, it's not true. I was just drunk and I was just making fun, and nothing is true. I was just talking. So we need facts. After we published the video, we started to investigate if there are those private corporations he spoke about, and we found it. And there were already other Austrian newspapers like Profil or the Standard or Die Presse, and they started to dig, and we found some private unions, or Vereine is the German word, where we could find the money.
Yeah. So you published the video, and then you kept working on the information that was there. Yeah. So the main lump of the work before the publication was to see what's there and to verify the origin of the video, or the validity of the video. Yeah.
Yes. There's also we looked into how much could we authenticate the origin. So how could we see, for example, if the villa that they told us about did really exist? So we could look at, the invoices. We got the receipts for the food that they had ordered that day. So we tried to reconstruct everything that we could around the video, and that we knew, they were really there. They're not playing a show for us in the back of some TV production. So we really tried to get as close as possible, knowing that, in the end they won't be as open as we'd hoped for, but given the huge public impact and the huge public interest, we had to say at some point, okay, now it's enough. Which was, by the way, after we also spoke the woman who was pretending to be the Russian oligarch's niece, I have to say that, and so to make sure that she was not blackmailed into playing around and all that. So we did all that we could, and then, when we finally said, okay, we are sure it's really Strach and Gudenus, we are sure the video is not manipulated and falsified, and we are sure that we understood what's going on and what we do see, then we said, okay, now we feel confident to publish.
And I heard Florian say in the beginning, in the video we showed in the beginning of this session, that the villa was rented and even the cars was rented. And I thought, well, they've been checking every detail. This is what he did. We are nearing 5:30, so I will start slowly looking towards the questions from the participants, and the first are there already. Let me start with the one which is put here by Okan Velikli. He asks, Florian, would you know about rumors that other videos showing Austrian politicians doing or saying controversial things might exist?
I don't know the rumors, but if Okan has those videos or he has links to persons that have those videos, please send them to us, and we make a cooperation with Die Deutsche Zeitung. Maybe they are about German politicians, so we could say thank you to you. Well, I don't know about that.
You meet in the chat here, and we'll all have a little.
Maybe we should discuss how we selected the 6 minutes, or how.
Yes, that was the next question, which you read it already. Yeah. And for those who haven't followed the chat, there was a question by Sabine that asking how you selected the scenes that you published, and whether there are other scenes that might be worth publishing that you would consider publishing or not consider publishing. So how did you select the scenes? Did you do that together, or was that individual, each of the media or media partners? How did you do it? Maybe Florian, you start.
I think, or maybe Bastian should start, because you had the lead. Yeah.
So it's kind of complicated, and then again it's not. So in Germany there are very high legal rules. There are high barriers you have to overcome to publish a video that's been secretly taped without the knowing of persons involved. So that means when we've got a video where we see Angela Merkel speaking in a very mean way about Bayern Munich, for example, saying that those are all very ugly fat guys who don't score enough, then that's not enough. So we need something of high public interest, of the highest public interest. So what we did was we took the quotes that we had, and then we sorted them, and we said, okay, which part is really the highest public interest? And our lawyers told us, they explained us, we can't publish, what we'd like to publish. We can only publish things that are of the highest public interest, and because otherwise we'd be take court and we'd lose. And we've seen after we published, I mean, there were many tries of involved parties to get us in court and to get us in jail and to sue us or whatever, but we've won everything, and we've won especially because we acted as we did. So the courts and the prosecutors in Germany said that we only showed the parts that are of the highest public interest, and this is, they think this was justified, although it's usually not allowed in Germany to show secretly taped videos of people.
I think that to make that clear, we were in an absurd situation, because it is easier to quote from a secretly taped video and take the quotes out of it than showing the secretly taped video and the audio. So I think that is something, that is the German law, and we had to stick to the German law. So that's the reason why we were able to quote more in our written reporting and also in the book we wrote about the Ibiza affair than the part that we were able to show in video and in audio. So I understand the parts of our audience that would like to learn more and would like to see more. But we were not able to publish more. And I also want to state there are parts that even if we were allowed, I would never show, because it was simply Mr. Strache and Mr. Gudenus spreading rumors and things that are obviously not true about third people that were not in the room. And I don't see any reason why we should distribute those statements.
Yeah, and this is an interesting aspect. Florian, would the legal situation be different in Austria? Would you be able to publish?
Nearly the same. So we had actually, there was a judgment by the Austrian High Court, by the Oberlandesgericht, that told that we are allowed to bring and to publish those things, because they said it's in the public interest. It's a matter of corruption. It was interesting because Mr. Strache always said that we are manipulating the video and that we bring fake news and that we don't broadcast those parts of the video where he speaks against corruption, which is actually not true. You saw it in the video. I brought it. I mentioned it at the end of the video, that he always said everything has to be legal. And on the other hand, Mr. Gudenus filed one lawsuit after the other to prevent us to bring the video
in full length.
So this was kind of double play. Yeah? So they wanted us to bring it, but they sued us when we bring. So it was difficult. But I have to say that the Austrian courts, all in all, made good decisions about it, because they said that we can bring it. Now Mr. Strache, which is interesting, has access to the video because it's part of his criminal files, and he gave it to some tabloid papers, to online media outlets that were in favor of him. There's one journalist, especially one journalist, who is always like writing what Mr. Strache wants him to write, and they published also parts of the video. And they always
other parts than what you published.
Yeah, but there are parts that were also mentioned in the book Bastian and Frederick wrote. So there's nothing new. So this is also the reason why there is not a big scandal now about it. So Strache always claimed that we were like fake news and we were liars and we were manipulating. But in fact, everything we wrote was true. And you see today that in another case, but it's the same, like the kind of the same complex, he got an indictment today. So he was charged with bribery today, and he has to go to court.
Yeah. There was one question that you basically already answered, whether, because what do you think of Strache saying that publishing the whole video would prove his innocence?
If the whole video would prove his innocence, he just should publish it. But he doesn't publish the whole video. Yeah, so he just could go. He has the video. He has all 7 hours. Yeah, so he could publish it on his own homepage. But actually, he didn't wanted us to publish it. When we got the videotape from the court files, he said he doesn't want us to publish it. Yeah. So this is kind of double
play. What were the legal reactions to your publications in both countries? Were you threatened? Were there?
Yes, of
Bastian.
course. I mean, so we had a number of people who went to the police, and they asked for us to go to jail for manipulating proof. There was one case in Austria, and then, I mean, for publishing the parts of the video and whatnot. So, and we defended us against all those things, and as of now, there are no court proceedings anymore in both countries. And,
were they brought individually or as against you together? Individually against Süddeutsche and Falter, or you as persons, or?
So in Germany against a number of persons, and also against Süddeutsche, and also against Der Spiegel. So like we had like, I don't know, 15 or 20 persons who initiated If you show them something that they could get for favors, and so that's really powerful. The wording is really powerful, and we feel that of course we did some mistakes, but we didn't make any big mistake, and legally spoken, we published what we were allowed through the special situation of highest public interest to publish. We couldn't publish more.
Now there are 5 more minutes. I'm just warning you because I am the moderator. I'm really fascinated by the legal implications, because this is such a new field, cross-border collaboration, and there are very few legal cases dealing with that. But there's a question now from the audience, so I will not be carried away by my own pet topic. And it's Sabine again asking, is there anything to tell regarding Gudenu's wife? She was involved in she was really involved in the public discussion. Rarely, I suppose.
Rarely,
I
probably.
should say. Are there any? Maybe we can enlarge the question a little bit. Are there any follow-ups to? Are there any threads that you haven't followed? Are there any things that you could follow up still from the video? Are there more stories to come out of this, or is this more now following the current today's case in Austria?
No, actually, the Ibiza case was the kickoff of numerous cases that started in Austria, because some weeks after we published it, there was a whistleblower from the Austrian gambling company Casinos Austria, and this whistleblower gave a lot of information to the corruption authorities, and they started raids in the offices of the most powerful people in this country. So there were raids in the office of the finance minister, of the former finance minister, of the former finance minister. There were raids in the offices of the bosses of the gambling companies, of bank managers. So there was a huge wave of investigations, and it's still going on. And now it's going to not only the FPÖ party of Mr. Strache is concerned, it's also the party of Mr. Kurz. And we already found out that there are some societies of the ÖVP party, so the party of Mr. Kurz, that got money from the Novomatic, for example, and it was just not indicted because it was too early, the case. It was verjährt. No, it's the English word of verjährt.
Too long ago.
Too long ago. And Mr. Kurz got really nervous. For example, last week, he retweeted an article of his party press agency that wrote that we didn't do a good job in the Ibiza work because we didn't report about some things that Mr. Strache said, and we got in a big battle with Mr. Kurz about that. So it's still going on, and I think it will change this country, because it was the first time that you really see those people doing corruption. And now Austria has a lot of chats because of this raid. A lot of mobile phones were confiscated. So the state authorities are now saving all these chats from Mr. Kurz and his ministers, and we can read that. So it's a lot of very interesting material about the inner core of the state.
Yeah, not only about the two on the video. Yeah. There's now only 2 minutes left, so it's for me time to begin wrapping up. There are no more questions. I see someone writing, but it's getting too late for answers, I'm afraid. I think the words from Florian that this investigation is changing your country, because it so prominently puts the question on the public agenda, is very encouraging for the research report of a cross-border collaboration, where from the very, very beginning you decided that it would be a clear win-win to collaborate, even though you were in the same language area, and you could have competed.
Yeah, I mean, we got rid of a neo-fascist party, and I mean, imagine that this party would now govern us in the corona pandemic. Yeah? So it was the second wave of corruption. We had the first wave under Jörg Haider, and then we had the second wave of corruption now, and we got rid of them. And Mr. Strache is now not in the chancellor, in the office of chancellor. He's in the court, and this is a very exciting outcome of this investigation.
And this is a very good way of closing this session, which I unfortunately have to do. I would love to keep talking with you, but we'll meet again. So thank you very, very much, Florian Klenk. Thank you very, very much, Bastian Obermeier. And thank you very, very much, Frederik Obermeier, who is, we hear you, but we don't see you right now. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Bye.
Thanks for moderating this panel.
Thanks.
Well, it's on my side to say also thank you, Brigitte, for moderating this fascinating panel. Thank you to the Obermeiers. You're always called the Obermeiers, although you are not brothers. But you work at the same newspaper, of course, at the Süddeutsche Zeitung. And also thank you, Florian Klenk from the Falter, for giving us this information about this highly interesting investigation. In a few minutes, meaning on 6 o'clock, we will start screening the documentary about the Ibiza affair. If you don't have a ticket right now, go to the IJ4EU website and get a ticket, please. This film will make you an eyewitness of the investigation that this panel was talking about. It is one of the most impactful investigations that we saw in Europe in recent years because a whole government, the Austrian government, stumbled over it. Now, before watching this film, it is my obligation to close this conference. I also want to use the time that I have to make two personal remarks about two news. Firstly, we as the community will not rest until the murder of our colleague Yorgos Karaivas, an investigative reporter in Athens, is fully investigated. Secondly, and maybe you heard of it or you read it on Twitter, today Poland's constitutional court has forced Adam Bodnar, the Commissioner of Human Rights, to leave office. Adam Bodnar, we worked with him, and he's really an ardent and passionate fighter for press and media freedom. And the government is not, as we know. And we will not let them get away with that. Now, let me thank you for this wonderful conference. First of all, thank you to all the extraordinary reporters and investigators who took part and showed us the results of their work. This was really a stunning exhibition of the power of cross-border investigative journalism, and a stunning exhibition also of collaboration, which was also a big aspect in the panel that we had and also in the panels before. We at the ECPMF, we are particularly proud of having had the opportunity to award the first prize that is exclusively dedicated to this cause, meaning to collaborative journalism across borders, the IJ4EU Impact Award. I want to thank all the panelists and all the chairs of this conference. I want to thank Silke and Morteza for their workshop on using artificial intelligence in cross-border journalism. I want to thank everybody who helped facilitate the screening and who facilitated clips and documentaries. This is Real Fiction Filme. This is Premier Ligne Television. This is Euronews, this is RBB, and this is Dagens Nyheter. I want to thank our moderator, Ali Arslan, for hosting the conference, the Media Foundation of Sparkasse Leipzig for providing the rooms that we are standing here, and also for the technical support. It's Gerd and Neil, which are sitting here and steering everything. I want to thank our partners at IPI, namely Tim Lodge, Scott Griffin, Helena Soares, and Barbara Triumphi. Barbara also moderated today. I thank the partners at EJC, at the European Journalism Center, especially Slatina Zidarova and Mienal Thakur, and of course the ECPMF staff, which is Andreas, Katrin, Alina, Roberta, Nies, Tomke, Annabelle, Jane, Lawrence, Nico, and Nick. I want to thank Alex Berlin for live streaming and the representation of the European Commission in Berlin for supporting this conference. Last but not least, special thanks goes to our supporters and funders, which made all this possible. This is the European Commission, this is the City of Leipzig, OSF, Frit Ord, and Luminate. And of course, the man of the day, who is already in another business, he's unfortunately not here, but I want to give a special thank you also to Barney Weston, who is the event manager of Uncovered and who made this conference happen together with Andreas Lamm. If you have feedback on the conference, we are very happy to listen to it. Don't hesitate to contact us. And here's my last word and my last recommendation. On the 18th of May is the start of Data Harvest, the next conference on investigative journalism. If you want to continue to exchange and discuss, you should also take part in this online event. Again, thank you for your participation in Uncovered. We hope to see you again in 1 year's time. Enjoy the documentary on Channel 3, which starts at 6 o'clock. And that will be streamed and that will guide you through the investigation the last panel talked about. Again, thank you so much. Hope to see you next year latest. Thank you.